Alrighty. Are we finally live now? Are we saying it? Hamilton? All right. Well, listen, thank you guys for hanging with us. If you guys can see us now, yeah, there we go. I'm starting to see it on the comments. For those of you who were wondering what happened to Hamilton, all that was required, I couldn't believe it. Christian jumped out of nowhere with a ball peen hammer, and the next thing you know, Hamilton was just going away on the keys and fixing technical
My apologies to everyone.
No, it's okay. We all thought tonight was going to be potentially a rough night where we decided whether or not Christian would still have a job. But it turns out, no, you're the one we're firing tonight. Sorry, Hamilton.
We cannot lose the good Hamilton, the one that does not like central baking.
All right, no, everyone give Hamilton a silent clap for a little slow golf clap. Good job, Hamilton. Good job.
Thank you.
All righty. Christian, well, listen, we had this whole thing planned, and we were going to kind of give you guys some updates on the predictions that we made before. If you were following along in the chat, you were able to see some of that. We kind of got some of Christian's predictions out there. The only one we haven't got yet was kind of like the overall generic House swap, what he thought was going to happen. So Christian is predicting 230 seats, at least 230 Republican
230 seats.
At the end of the day, if you actually look at what we have for his predictions on the Senate races, I'm going to go through them right now very quickly before we force Christian to come in here and give us some updates. So New Hampshire, unfortunately, he doesn't think we're going to win New Hampshire. Pennsylvania, he does think we're going to win. Georgia, win. Arizona, win. Nevada, win. Ohio, Republican. North Carolina, Republican. Wisconsin, Republican. He doesn't think we're going to pull it off in Washington or Colorado, but there's still time. Polls haven't closed out there. So if you're watching this out in Colorado and Washington, get to the polls. What are you doing? Unless you've already gone, in which case stay here. All right, governors. He doesn't quite think we're going to pull it off in New York, but that could just be his pessimism. Doesn't think we're going to pull it off in Michigan, but does anticipate that Republicans will win the governor races in Georgia, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and in Florida, it's looking a little bit like, a bloodbath, I think might be the way.
I said bloodbath and then corrected it and said, oh, I'm sorry, it's a red wave bloodbath.
It's starting to turn into a bloodbath in Florida. 47% of the vote has been counted in Florida, and Marco Rubio is up by 9 points currently.
Jeez.
Which is... I don't think I've seen something like that in my lifetime, to be honest.
Well, the thing that's important to remember here, right, this is kind of a general principle. Typically, the left does better on early voting, and the right does better on election day voting. And so usually what you have is this kind of what we call a Democrat firewall on election day, and that is the early votes that need to be counted and pushed toward the overall tallies. Because for some reason, in a lot of places, Virginia had this issue before, they will count the election day votes first as opposed to all the votes that have already been tallied and voted on. Florida, I think, was doing that actually a little bit differently. That's why we had the early voting results in so quickly. It's one of the reasons why I think it looks like Florida results are coming in faster than other places. Go figure. When a state is well managed, you actually can get to the results faster. But the fact that, listen to this. This is one of the biggest things. Christian brought this up today. That Republicans won early voting in Miami-Dade County is a huge indicator for Florida. What we said, like this is the first time in, over 2 decades?
Miami-Dade voted for Jeb ! In 2002.
Jeb, please clap.
But
please clap.
I don't necessarily know that Jeb ! Actually carried the early vote in Miami-Dade.
Yeah.
So, he won Miami-Dade, I think, with like 42% of the vote in 2002. Somebody who's actually watching this, if they want to look it up, they could prove me wrong. But I don't necessarily know if that meant that he won the early vote. I actually tried to look that up before this live stream, and I couldn't find evidence of that. If Jeb didn't win the early vote in Miami-Dade, then you have to go back to the 1980s to find the last time that something like that happened.
So it's bottom line is it's a big deal. Nobody here tonight, like I'll give you, you can probably imagine that because of where we're at, we're following some of the Virginia races. Virginia 7th is near and dear to my heart because of what happened in 2020. Yesli Vega is a really strong candidate. And the thing that we've been watching in Virginia right now for something like the 7th district is kind of an indicator, not just for what's going on in Virginia, but across the country, is early voting totals. And then we have something unique in Virginia because we have off-year elections. So in most of your states, as we see tonight, governors get elected the same time that Congress is getting elected or the president gets elected. Not in Virginia. Everything's off by a year. So Youngkin got elected the year after the Biden-Trump election cycle. Okay, and so what we're looking at right now is we're comparing like Yesley Vega's numbers in the Virginia 7th to what Youngkin got within that same geographical area, within that same district back in 21. And what we're seeing so far is that Yesley seems to be doing as good, and in certain areas like my home county of Culpeper, actually doing better than Youngkin did with total vote numbers. So if she can keep that up, that looks like she can win that race. And what that means for the rest of the country is this was a race that, I mean, earlier in the year, I don't think anybody thought Republicans were going to win it. They thought it would be competitive, but at the end of the day, they thought Spanberger would probably pull it off by a couple points. And as far as we're looking right now, Vega's performing very well. If she can keep those Youngkin numbers up, she should win this district. And again, that's kind of a bellwether for your competitive districts across the country, right? So we'll look at those. We're a couple of the sites that we're looking at too, if you're interested. I will say this. I used to think that Fox News had kind of a crappy election day website.
They have a nice little fancy ticker now.
It's gotten better. Their ticker's a little bit better. The map's good. Another thing that you can look at too, if you're looking for updated results, because the major networks, they're actually going to your state Department of Elections or Board of Elections or whatever it is in your state. Another thing that we have like in Virginia is something called vpap.org, vpap.org. It is a great site. I mean, they're just really easy to understand. The problem with some of these state sites is they're run by, the government. And so it's not the most user-friendly
Christian, are you on VPAP right now?
I am on VPAP.
You want to walk everyone through what VPAP is?
VPAP is the Virginia Political Access Project. It's probably the best elections website that deals with a single state of any state in the entire country. I wish every single state had a VPAP.
Yeah, it's great.
VPAP is currently tracking the election results. It's not 100% like live because they've got to pull it from the local registrar's office and stuff like that. But yeah, I've got the 7th pulled up. I've got the sorry, that's an older election. I've got the 2nd pulled up here in Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads.
We've got a request for the 10th with Hung
I've got the 10th here pulled up. It's
working on
like,
getting your video on screen.
Okay. It's looking like that the 10th is the election day vote was kind of split in Loudoun County, which means that it's going to be early votes versus rurals, and that's going to decide what happens in the 10th.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, Hung Kao is running against Jennifer Wexton. Jennifer Wexton used to be in the Virginia State Senate. She's a congresswoman now. She beat Barbara Comstock. And then we had redistricting. Well, they drew her a seat that was competitive, but again, everyone at the beginning of the year was thinking Wexton's going to win this thing. And I got to say two things here. One, obviously, the momentum has been at the Republicans' back for a while now, but Hung Kao has run an incredible race in that district. His voter outreach has been just incredible. And, of course, his backstory, too, is phenomenal. He really does. I mean, family came over from Vietnam. He served in the military. Again, a great story, and he did a great job of voter outreach. And this is one thing I'll tell people. In fact, I'm going to make somebody mad right now when I say this, but please believe me when I tell you it's the truth. There's been tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars spent researching campaign efforts. And the number one thing that you get as a candidate when it comes to campaign efforts is, where's my yard sign? Please believe me when I tell you this. If you're arguing with a candidate on why they haven't gotten you a yard sign yet to put it at the end of your cul-de-sac, right? That's not what wins elections. All right, the sort of stuff that like Yesley Vega was doing and like Jen Kagan's down in the Virginia 7th and Hung Kao was doing, where you're out there and you're repeatedly going out and having voter contacts. Number one most important thing for a candidate is how often did they get in front of voters? And then secondly, how often did their people get out in front of voters? So obviously a candidate can't meet everybody, but if they have a really good staff with a ground game that are knocking on doors, that is the most effective by far. It is not even close. I'm not saying that yard signs have no value. I'm simply saying that, again, the most important thing you can do to help a candidate is get out there and door knock. And these guys did a great job. And so we're seeing the fruits of that right now as we look at some of the early results here in the 7th district. Some of it, too, we're still waiting a lot more. Like 33% is in for the 7th district.
Do we have anything for the Kagan's race yet?
Kagan's race is 17% in. Right now it's looking at 56%. Kagan's 43% Loria, so 56 for the Republican, 43% for the Democrat, but that's only 17% reporting, so nobody should be popping champagne anytime soon with that. It does look like most of the local, so Whitman, Good, Klein, Griffith, it looks like all of those are going to be easy to maintain. By the same token, over on the the Democrat side, the 3rd district, 4th district, 8th district, and 11th district. We never really thought that Republicans are going to win those anyways. So right now what we're looking at is it looks like 4 safe Republican seats, 4 safe Democrat seats, and then we have 3 that are competitive, 2 of them highly competitive at this point. So that's what we're seeing in Virginia. I would say, again, if you're looking for something that is just really encouraging right now, Florida is the story. Just across the board.
Now, it looks like Ohio still has the Democrat up.
It does, but this early, this early. So here's the other thing to keep in mind. Whenever you're looking at these results, and some of the networks do a fairly decent job of talking about this, but obviously, your urban areas tend to favor Democrats. Your rural areas tend to favor Republicans with respect to their vote total. So you'll see this thing where it's like, 13% of the vote in, and here's the total. And every once in a while, people on election night will get upset. They'll look at these news networks and say, how could they call the race when there's only 3% of the vote in? Let me tell you what they're doing when they do that. So if, let's say 3% of the vote comes in, and you've got a rural county where the Democrat is actually doing, let's say, 20% better than anticipated, all right, in a state that typically goes Democrat. So, we'll take Illinois, for instance. If they've got, maybe 3% of votes coming in Illinois where the Democrat was already leading by 20 points, and there's no early indicators that there's going to be some sort of major upset, they tend to call them early. Now, you can argue that some networks call them too early, and I think that would be perfectly appropriate. All I'm saying is that in some of these cases, it's not quite as nefarious as it's sometimes made out to be. Other times, sure it is. Again, let me go over as we got some stuff coming in here. I want to go again over some of Christian's predictions, what he thought, because again, I don't know if you guys saw the chat, but we already said that if Christian gets this wrong tonight, we're replacing him with a puppy.
Did you actually say that?
I did actually say that. I actually said that we would replace you with a puppy if you got this wrong. We haven't picked out the breed yet. I was going for mini schnauzer. We've got a couple boxers. I love boxers, beautiful breed, but I was going to go for mini schnauzer. Here were Christian's predictions, so we can all hold him accountable together. All right?
Christian, why don't you give us your overview of how the night's going?
No, wait a second. I'm going to do my predictions
okay.
first, and then he can do that.
Okay.
Christian's predictions, once again. New Hampshire, he said, was going Democrat. This is Senate predictions. New Hampshire, Democrat. Pennsylvania, Republican. So that's Oz beating Fetterman. Georgia, Republican. That's Walker winning. Arizona, he said Masters. Blake Masters was going to win, which that would be a big upset. Nevada, who is it in Nevada again, Christian?
Adam Laxalt and Catherine Cortez.
Laxalt, that would also be something of an upset. Ohio would be J.D. Vance. North Carolina would be Ted Budd. Wisconsin would be a hold for Republicans. That would be Ron Johnson.
Yeah.
And then the 2 competitive ones that he thinks are still going to go Democrat are Washington State and Colorado. But the important part to remember there is that the Democrats never even thought these would be competitive. So the fact that they were having to spend money and spend time in these states means they weren't spending that money and time in the states that were more competitive. All right.
Hold on. We got a question from Karen Hamilton saying, thanks for doing this.
I don't think she and I are related.
Okay. All right. She says, what are the main bellwethers that you're all looking at?
Christian, what do you got?
I suppose it depends on the state. If we're talking about the U.S. Senate, I think that the best states to look for on the East Coast would be Pennsylvania, maybe Georgia. Pennsylvania is a really, really big one because it's an open seat.
Yeah.
I'm really looking to Nevada on the West Coast. It's not actually on the West Coast, but you get what I mean. Like in the western side of the country. I love that he's finally
saying Nevada correctly.
I know, you guys just beat it into me. But
yep.
Nevada.
Here's the reason why. Because Nevada was this state that had been consistently, I talked about this on the podcast recently. Nevada is one of these states that has consistently been voting blue since 2008. But what you've noticed with that Democrat margin has shrunk every single election cycle since 2008. And this could be, Democrats have swept gubernatorial races, Senate races, congressional races, presidential races. You name it. They've won basically everything in the state. But it's been by less and less, fewer and fewer margins.
Okay.
And with the shift that you've seen among blue-collar workers and Hispanics in particular, And with the reports that we've seen from people like John Ralston, who's Politico out in Nevada, like it's looking like that unless there's like a wave of mail-in ballots from the union bosses over in Clark County, that Republicans are going to have a really good night in that state. The reason
you're looking at, so real quick to sum this up, all right, you're looking at Pennsylvania as something to watch. So, like, again, in Pennsylvania, a lot of people were saying that at the beginning this is going to be for the Democrats. Then you started to see the polls closing. Then you saw the debate, and all of a sudden, Fetterman was in a ton of trouble. So, I mean, I looked at PA more as, okay, that would be good, but we got a solid shot of winning that. That doesn't necessarily say, oh my gosh, if we win, that's earth shattering. But you're saying that Nevada would be a better indication of something being, that there's something bigger happening.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that really tells the story a lot of what's going to happen in 2024 is that state. Because if we can flip this state, like that is a really good sign that whoever we nominate in 2024, like that battleground map can expand. Mm-hmm. Because there were a lot of people that basically wrote the state off after 2016. It was like the third consecutive loss.
Let me ask you this question, because a lot of people, I mean, typically you think if a state's going one way, then it's going that way. But you believe that PA is probably going to go for Oz in the Senate, but that Mastriano is not going to win the governorship.
Yeah.
So what's your reasoning for that?
Mastriano has just run a terrible campaign. It's as simple as that. And there's enough swing voters that are willing to split their ticket in Pennsylvania that their split ticket voting has declined over the last 20 years, but it's picked up. It stayed around enough in certain states like Pennsylvania that you could see a scenario where Democrats win the governorship but then lose the Senate election.
Yeah. Especially
when you consider how the wheels kind of fell off the Fetterman bus right before Election Day, which means that you're going to have a lot of people that might be center-left voters that are going to be comfortable voting for the Democrat for governor because that's how they were going to vote all along, but they've now made that change in the last couple weeks or so.
Okay. But then you got a place like Georgia where, I mean, let's face it, Herschel Walker has not run a good campaign. It's like if we were Herschel Walker has run the Fetterman campaign, but in Georgia. But by contrast, Kemp has actually run a really good disciplined campaign, whereas Stacey Abrams, the current governor of Georgia, who is not the governor of Georgia, and who is already claiming that there's been massive voter suppression, even though we've had huge, early voting turnouts in Georgia. Kemp has run such a good campaign that we think he's probably going to pull Herschel Walker across the finish line. I mean, is that accurate?
I think that it's going to go to a runoff, but if it doesn't and Walker wins, I think in large part it's going to be because Democrats just collapse. It just collapsed at the top of the ticket with the gubernatorial election.
Okay. Is there any House races you would say are like bellwethers?
In those states, I don't see any in Georgia, but in Pennsylvania, you've got the 7th and the 8th, in the Lehigh Valley and Scranton as well, in the northeastern part of the state. Those are both held by Democrat incumbents, and they're very, very close districts. One of them, the 8th, voted for Trump, and the 7th, I believe, voted for Biden. But by relatively small margins, both of them. Both held by Democrat incumbents. These are like the type of districts that Republicans have to flip in order to take control of the House.
And I gotta say, it's Bogert in, what is it, the PA 8th, Pennsylvania 8th? He's the one running in Scranton?
Yes, he's running against Matt Cartwright.
He's ran a good campaign. And I actually got to hear him speak on issues. I was pretty impressed. The other thing that's important to understand is that Scranton is, again, Joe Biden's like hometown, right? Joe Biden always likes to talk how he's from Scranton, even though he hasn't been there since he was 4. But that's always a big deal for him. Also, fun fact, because we know someone on the inside up there, Scranton, Pennsylvania, precincts in Scranton, Pennsylvania, actually ran out of paper ballots. So that's right. The home of the Michael Scott Paper Company and the home of Dunder Mifflin has run out of paper ballots, or has had a shortage of paper ballots, which is, of course, problematic, but we feel for him.
Hey, can we come back to Virginia real quick?
Yeah.
We've got some folks asking about how it looks in Prince William as well as the Fredericksburg area for Yesli Vegas. So if you could give us a quick update on Yesli.
Let me pause real quick. Just a quick announcement for everybody watching. I'm going to cut to a graphic. Our audio is going to keep rolling. We're going to keep moving forward. Just need to reset our switcher so I can show you, Tina, and our screen. So we will be right back with video, but we're going to keep rolling.
Okay.
I'm perfectly happy not being shown.
So to give you an idea, what I'm seeing in Prince William County so far is they've got only 6 of 61 precincts reporting. There's a estimated 26,326 estimated early votes outstanding. So what they're looking at right now in Prince William County is 2,939 votes for Spanberger, 1,589 for Vega. Again, the important thing to remember there is that's let me see here. 6 precincts out of 61. So there's still a long way to go there. What was the other county they asked about?
Prince William.
That was Prince William.
Area.
Fredericksburg area.
We talked about the Spotsy numbers earlier, but
Fredericksburg City is not in yet.
Okay.
And yeah, that's God, don't get me started. The good news is that in Culpeper County, there's 12 of 15 precincts reporting 10,059 votes for Vega, 6,722 for Spanberger. I mean, Vega's looking at 60% numbers right here. In fact, let me look at this real quick. I want to see which precincts are outstanding, if we can see that. So there's 5,929 early votes outstanding. Okay, so some of the outstanding precincts in Culpeper are West Fairfax, which that's kind of a 50-50 precinct. Pearl Sample, which is definitely more of a conservative one, and then Lignum is a conservative one, but it tends to be a little bit smaller. I'll tell you 2 indications right now that are really good for Vega. Vega 1 Willow Shade Precinct, which is the northern portion of the town of Culpeper, and it wasn't close. She won it by 60%. Like you don't win Willow Shade by 60%.
For those of you who know that Willow Shade, isn't Willow Shade one of the areas that it is starting to turn bluer?
It's part of.
We've got like this cancer in the middle of Culpeper.
It's considered part.
blue.
It's considered part of the town. But here's the other thing. There's one precinct that Democrats can usually always count on in Culpeper, and that's East Fairfax. And in East Fairfax, Democrats should be winning like 55 to 58%. Spanberger only won 52.57%, so she did not perform well there. The other one too that we usually kind of look at is Southridge. Southridge is also considered kind of more of a swing to maybe leans blue precinct in the town of Culpeper, and Vega won it 54%. So I mean, what this really means right now is we'll see what happens in West Fairfax. I think Vega's got a really good chance of pulling out a victory in West Fairfax as well, and then her vote totals in the other precincts are all in the 70s, which is great. So, I mean, she's doing well. Yeah.
Now, somebody was also asking about Fauquier County.
Well, forget your county too.
Hey.
So Fauquier County is part of the 10th district, so that's Hung Cow. Let me go ahead and pull back out to that. So I'll do that while Christian's getting other stuff together. All righty.
Oh, somebody wants some information on Missouri as well, if there's anything.
Republicans are going to win Missouri.
So
I'll bet any amount of money on that one.
Yeah. So right now in Fauquier County, Hung Cow has 16 out of 24 precincts reporting, and an estimated 11,719 early votes outstanding. But right now, out of that 16 and 24 precincts, it is 70% Cow. So doing well so far, but again, we'll see what happens. In fact, chances are, let me just go ahead and
Joel
click.
Foster says that Fox News is calling VA 9 for Republican. I don't think that
that's
was
not.
That's
Yeah,
Morgan
that's Southwest
Griffith.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Morgan Griffith.
That's
man.
like, I'll tell you what, they can, yeah. And you know what? We can call Wyoming for the Republican while we're at it. Anything they're running for in there. Okay. Yeah. So the places that'll look like are outstanding in Fauquier. Okay, it looks like there's a couple little blue areas. Still waiting on some more numbers to come. Okay, so we've got kind of a split. We've got some rural areas that are still outstanding, and then we've got a couple areas that are probably going to swing a little bit more blue outstanding. But overall, if what we're looking for is Hung Cow to probably get, what would you say, Christian? Maybe around 60% in Fauquier County.
He definitely needs at least 60%.
Yeah, he has to get right there around 60. Okay. All right. Do we got any more questions from the audience before I just start mouthing off again?
Christian, we do have a lot of folks in the stream right now, and I'm sure they'd be interested to hear your general update for how things are going.
Sure. So let's take a look outside of just Virginia for a moment. I've got 538 and ABC's election tracker up.
You good for me to show your screen?
Yeah, go ahead. How many people are with us right now?
292.
292, I know.
290.
Don't
So-
screw this up, Christian.
A couple pieces of information that weren't terribly, unexpected is that Kentucky ended up being called for Senator Rand Paul. So congratulations to Rand Paul. He's won another term in office. Indiana has been called for Todd Young, and Tim Scott has won in South Carolina. These are all states that weren't hyper competitive. I mean, the most competitive one you could argue is potentially Indiana. The big one is, and I'm actually surprised they haven't called this one yet. The big one is Florida. Rubio's currently leading by like 11 points.
Yeah.
I'm talking about in terms of big ones like that we have many votes already
Yeah.
from. We've already got like 5 million votes counted in Florida at this point. Florida, I mean, you can call Florida. Florida's already done, but it's just that the networks haven't actually done it yet.
Yeah.
It's kind of remarkable though that Rubio is actually leading by a bigger margin than I thought at this point. I thought that you would end up seeing about a 8 to 10 point victory for Rubio and for DeSantis down there. And at the moment, it's looking like that Rubio is going to win by 11. And I have a feeling that DeSantis will be able to match that pretty easily.
Well, and that's the other thing you got to look at is that obviously Rubio's been doing this for a while. He's a strong incumbent in a state that is trending more and more red. And then DeSantis is an incredibly popular governor in many ways. And but the fact that the Democrats chose Charlie Crist to run was just, I mean, my gosh. I'm really hoping. I will just say this. Charlie, if you can hear this, it's probably not going to be a good night for you down in Florida. I would like to personally invite you to come and run for whatever you would like in Virginia. As a Democrat, though, you don't get to run as a Republican. No more. That ship has sailed, my friend. But we would love to have you come up here and run as a Democrat.
You know that Charlie Crist is about to make history. He will be the first person, I think, ever to lose a statewide election in Florida as a Republican, as an independent, and as a Democrat.
Wow.
Let that be a lesson to you. Yeah.
Wow. He's got the trifecta.
Yeah.
The hat trick.
Do we have any information on
So I had someone-
Michigan?
So
DeSantis, so 66% of Miami-Dade has been counted, and DeSantis is leading by 8 points in Miami-Dade.
Oh my
with 2/3 of the
gosh.
vote counted.
Okay,
Can
for
you-
those who are just recently tuning in, explain the significance of that, please.
Miami-Dade County, I was actually born there. It is the largest county in Florida. It's the 7th largest county in the entire country. It's got over 2 million residents, 100% urban county, home of Miami. Minority majority county. It's got, I think it's like 2/3 Hispanic. And as recently as 2016, Republicans got absolutely blown out of the water there. They lost it by 2-1. And then Trump almost won it in 2020. He lost it by about 7 points, and that was like a historic shift to the right. And suddenly, when DeSantis came along, there was a lot of talk that DeSantis' popularity combined with a rightward shift with Hispanic voters could mean that for the first time in literally decades, this 100% urban county, one of the largest counties in America, with a large minority majority population, would end up flipping to the Republican side, and right now it's looking like that's going to happen.
Well, and I think this goes to some of the other discussions that we're going to have later tonight as we start to see more results coming in. One of the big questions that we had when we did our election prediction episode on Monday was there are some elections where you might see a major switch. And it's because of circumstances. And that very well could be what happens right now, right? It could just be a combination of inflation, the war in Ukraine, how bad the Biden administration is, or it can actually signify something a little bit more fundamental with respect to political demographics. Now, again, as we explained before, when the Obama administration was coming into power and they were really on the ascendancy, the Democrats had this strategy where it was kind of a coalition of like working class Americans, minorities, women voters, and this was going to be their coalition. What was it, the coalition of the ascendancy or something like that?
That's what the Democrats like to call it.
Yeah, that's what they called it. And so it was this idea, and it was almost this foregone conclusion by Democrats that minorities would just vote for them in perpetuity. And then what ended up happening, and we first started to see some problems with this, believe it or not, with the Trump administration, right? And for a lot of Republicans, we're like, yeah, we believe that, but there's a lot of the talking heads thought that was just absurd, right? Trump was, according to Democrats, Trump was just fascism. So of course, minority voters would hate him and women voters would hate him. And there were certainly certain groups and pockets and whatnot that did hate Trump. But we started to see kind of some pulling away. We started to see some cracks in the armor with respect to this coalition the Democrats have put together. And then we really started to see those cracks in Virginia in 2021 with Youngkin, Winsome Sears, Jason Mieres running here in Virginia. And again, we've talked about this a lot because it's important. And the reason why I'm going to bring it up again is because the Democrats used a particular strategy in Virginia and they got hammered for it, right? So Democrats had won the House of Delegates. They had won the Virginia Senate, the governor, the attorney general, the lieutenant governor. They had it all. They could do whatever they wanted, and boy, did they. And the end result was, and what we kept saying was, the voting public cannot be on the same sheet of music with where Democrats were on a lot of these kind of crazier issues. And then when COVID hit and it was shut down everything, but the liquor stores can stay open because they're run by the government here in Virginia. And all of a sudden, parents were seeing more and more of what their kids were seeing within classrooms. They started to get concerned. And it wasn't just like conservative rural voters, right? You had suburban parents that were probably center or left of center that were getting concerned about this. And when they approached Democrat representatives and said, hey, I have a problem with what's going on, or why is my kid's school still closed? Or, oh, by the way, why are they being taught this? The Democrat response is, oh, you must be a racist, bigoted, sexist, transphobe, right? And voters in Virginia did not take that well, and they punished the Democratic Party by doing a clean sweep with respect to Republicans. So the big question for everybody watching was, are they going to take that strategy national? Or are they going to learn from it? They took it nationally. I mean, the whole the DNC strategy this entire election cycle seems to go like this. Is this person voting for you? No. Have you called them a racist? Yes. Did it work? No. Call them a racist even harder and see if it helps.
Or threaten to chemically castrate their kids. Just to throw this out there.
Leave it to Tina to pull those punches, I'll tell you.
That's right. Fox News has called Florida for Rubio and DeSantis already.
Okay. Well, that's not a shocker.
So Florida looking good. No hanging chads this year.
Wow.
I remember that year. That was
we
a
dated
long
ourselves
time ago.
on that one. Babe.
That's okay. We're old.
Yeah, we are old. Yeah, so Florida's been called right now. All right, let's look at some of these other ones. Oh, but yeah, the bottom line is that we really wanted to see, was she going to, again, was the Democratic Party and the National Party going to learn from what happened in Virginia? Were they simply going to double down on it? And they've doubled down on it. And what we're now seeing in this election cycle is those cracks that started to become present between kind of like 2016, 2020 are now really becoming visible, and we're actually starting to see good candidates that are coming in and doing really, really good outreach. And I want to point something out. It's not this sort of outreach, I mean, not in all cases, but it's not the sort of outreach that is kind of the pandering. It's more about saying, look, here's our values. This is what we believe. If those values represent you, then we're the party for you. And I think more and more people that might have been skeptical of the Republican Party, in part because of horrible messaging on the Republican Party, let's not let ourselves off the hook, have been more and more willing to say, okay, I'm so mad at them, I'm going to give you a chance. But whenever that happens, you have a choice to make. Because if you just say, okay, great, we'll take the win, thanks, then you're going to lose it 2 years later. But if you say, no, this is an opportunity to actually make genuine inroads with people that are finally giving us an opportunity to make a case for why our values and what we're fighting for effectively represents them, then you can do that well. And that's where you see people like Yesli Vega, Hung Kao doing an incredible job in that area and really building coalitions that are going to allow us beyond one election cycle.
Well, if you're looking for the left to learn the lesson, they sure haven't yet. They're already blaming Manchin for their massive losses this year for some reason. Apparently Manchin didn't talk about, chemically castrating kids enough or, have enough drag shows for his campaign. I don't know. But apparently that's how things are done now on the left. So maybe they'll learn the lesson, maybe they won't.
Well, and when you also see stuff like this, there was a commentator on MSNBC that already said that voter suppression in Georgia is worse than we've even seen in 2018. Right, and then Stacey Abrams says her poll numbers are low because black men can't see through misinformation.
Patriarchy.
So once again, the only thing that explains the Democrat law. Now, here's what I don't understand. That MSNBC commentator saying that this is all about voter suppression, right? Telling us that we can't trust election results. I was told that was insurrection talk. But apparently it's okay now. Apparently it's
okay. So we've got
different.
People asking about New York, North Carolina, where we've got folks asking for other areas. And so I'm just going to throw those out there and see if Christian can get us some answers on these.
Okay.
So quick, folks, in the comments, type in the area that you're wanting, and I will make Christian do the fast typing and find it for you and find out what he knows.
I'll say right. Hemlock Tower asked if North Carolina is going well for Ted Budd. I mean, it looks like right now it is. Yes.
So, Republicans need to hope that turnout is down in Prince William County currently.
For Democrats, right?
Yes. Vega's doing okay, but she's just doing okay at the moment in terms of the historical average. She won Culpeper 60-40. She won Orange 60-40. That's fine, but
it's not phenomenal.
That is well within that margin where it's not like I can call the district for Yesli off of those margins.
Okay, so moving on, we've got Georgia, Oklahoma, Arizona, Indiana, VA2 people. Lots of questions. So
we can call Oklahoma now.
Get moving, man. Let's go.
Okay,
the people demand it.
Let's speed up and we'll go to in Georgia. It is there's not a lot of the vote actually in Georgia right now. There's only about 26% of the vote in Georgia. So
and depending on where those votes are coming in from,
it's currently it's looking like the Atlanta metro area is the one that's in right now because Democrats are leading in the state heavily.
But that's actually
that's kind of good news.
Now I would argue that's actually good news. Like I would far rather the urban areas come in sooner rather than later.
Oh, I would too, easily.
Now with Arizona, I don't think their polls are closed yet, are they? Have they closed yet?
No.
So we won't get any results for Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona will be
closed.
outstanding for a while.
Yep.
Yeah, and gosh, man, Arizona is another one that's going to be. I think it's one of the ones to watch to determine whether or not we're actually looking at a significant trend, because the press went so far overboard to try to convince us that Carrie Lake was a psycho. And then all of a sudden we got to actually meet Carrie Lake, and it turns out that she was incredibly, fast on her feet. She handles the press very, very well. I'm trying to get some other results in here for you. So just to give everyone kind of an idea of what we're looking at, obviously we're not all that concerned about places like Kentucky, right? Like Rand Paul was going to win that way. It was news. South Carolina, the same thing. With Ted Budd in North Carolina right now, that one is going to be, it's still going to be close, but we still think Ted Budd's going to win it. Alabama, I mean, that's already been called. Again, Florida already called. Oklahoma, this was just, I mean, what is it? There's 2 seats there. Let me look at Oklahoma real quick. Yeah, we're still waiting on that because that's also a time issue. It's only 8:00 here, so we got a ways to go on that. But I can just tell you right now, we're at no point
Tennessee. Anything for Tennessee?
At no point have any of us been worried about Oklahoma, and at no point have any of us been worried about. Well, here, let me look. When you say
we did
Tennessee,
say Indiana's doing well, so and I have family in Indiana. Good job, folks.
Yeah, yeah. Certain states, again, certain states you just really don't have to be all that worried about. Like again, we're not worried about Alabama. We're not really worried about Indiana. The ones that we're really paying close attention to are Pennsylvania, Ohio, to some degree New Hampshire. New Hampshire. So here's let's talk about New Hampshire here real briefly, because I will say this much, and I think Christian will agree, but he can chime in if he doesn't. If Donald Bolduc, who's former military, former general, I think he was a special operations guy, if he were to win New Hampshire, that would be an indication that this is going to be a horrible night for Democrats, because nobody, to include us, had picked him to win that race. And quite frankly, Mitch McConnell kind of pulled the funding out from underneath him when Bolduc said, "Well, I'm not going to vote for Mitch McConnell as leader," and which, by the way, I think is pretty crappy to say. We're not going to go after a seat that we could potentially win unless you vote for me as leader. That seems a little bit extortionist to me. But
do you mean Kevin McCarthy?
No,
Mitch McConnell.
Senate. Yeah, it was the Senate.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Keep up here,
Sorry.
Hamilton. All right. All right. Let me see. What's some other questions here?
Christian, what are you seeing happening right now?
Well, Democrats needed a late-day voter surge in Virginia in order to win some of these competitive races, and it's looking like they got it.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
So to give you an
so
idea,
explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
Every county that I've looked at that is produced all of their results, Spanberger in the 7th, where we live, from what I'm looking at, is getting the margins that she needs in Culpeper, Orange, Spotsylvania.
Even with the excellent turnout. So was this an early
it
voting
was a high turnout environment where it was a high turnout environment in red districts and red precincts. So it makes it look like that Republicans crushed it, and they did, but Democrats also showed up on election day. They showed up very late in some some precincts. I know that for a fact, actually, because there were some precincts that were very, very blue, especially in the Prince William area and Stafford and the Fredericksburg metro area. And the turnout there was just really, really bad. And then it picked up massively in the last 2 hours before the polls closed. And
so what do you think would cause such a surge late in the day?
Just Democrats doing the math at their own campaign headquarters and seeing, oh my gosh, we're about to get blown out of the water, and doing knock and drag.
What is knock and drag?
Show up to an apartment complex with a bus, go through, knock on doors, and get people on the bus and drive them to the polls.
Shove them into cars or buses and drive them to the polls and get them to vote, and then take them home.
That is wild.
Yeah,
well, here's something to understand too. This is kind of an interesting dynamic that people sometimes don't think about from a logistics standpoint when it comes to campaigning. In a rural area, it is a lot more difficult to get out the vote. People have to want to go to the vote because you can't do the same thing. You're not pulling up with a bus, on a bunch of properties that are 10 acres. Right, you're just not doing that because one, it's not very
high density areas.
It doesn't make sense, and two, you pull up with a bus on 10 acres in my county, they're gonna be a little bit upset with you and ask why you're there, right? But you go into some of these high packed, high density areas. It's really easy to go to a couple of spots and pick up, 30, 40 voters. Hey,
before we go into something new or continue on this track, we've got folks just joining us that kind of want a brief overview on
where we're at,
results and where we're at, kind of, I think, nationwide. Mo Mubarak, what areas exactly are you looking for? Are you looking for Virginia or are you looking for
do you want me to do an
everywhere?
overview, Christian, while you're looking at data?
Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the overview we're looking at. Some of the races that I'll go from top to bottom, right to left. So again, New Hampshire is one we're watching, not because we necessarily think the Republicans are going to pull it off, but because it would be an indicator of how bad a night Democrats were going to have if they lost that one. Next, when you start going, south from there, Pennsylvania is a huge one to watch right now. The bottom line is we only got 4% reporting. Now, of that 4%, almost all of it is going to Fetterman, which means that's probably, urban areas. And so as the night goes on, it's going to look a whole lot better for Oz than it currently does. North Carolina, we've got about 43% of the vote in right now. There's about a 10-point difference with the Democrat ahead. But what that tells me is that we're actually waiting a lot of rural areas to come out. We still expect Ted Budd to be able to pull that off. South Carolina called for Tim Scott. No shock there. Georgia, we only got 30% of the votes in at this point. Warnock's leading. But again, we expected that because some of these states have actually done a better job of, one, counting their early votes up front, and the urban areas actually getting the results in faster, which, again, is beneficial. Florida went hardcore for Marco Rubio and for Ron DeSantis, just no question there. Again, the big indicator down in Florida that's really important is the fact that Republicans won early voting in Miami-Dade, which is a huge county, 2 million people, majority minority population. So it demonstrates that Republicans have done a much better job of actually reaching out into other voter pools that we haven't done as well in the past. Alabama went Republican, no shock there. Kentucky, Republican, no shock. Ohio is another one that we're watching. There's only 11% reporting there, so that's going to be a while. Pennsylvania and Ohio are going to take some time. Just don't worry about it, but that's going to take some time to report. But those two are really important races. Indiana are already good. Todd Young. Illinois, again, we weren't concerned. We knew the Democrat was going to win that. Missouri, Republicans should win that. We only got 1% of the reporting in so far. Kansas right now is actually going to be an interesting one to watch. We'll see what happens. Oklahoma, again, we're not concerned about. They're going to win. Once you start going further west than that, Colorado is another one that we're watching, not because we thought the Republican was necessarily going to win, but we wanted to see how close it was going to be and how he performed in certain areas. The big ones out west that we're looking for, Arizona and Nevada, because Nevada's actually been trending in a positive direction for Republicans. And then Arizona, the reason why that's so interesting is that Democrats really thought that Carrie Lake was going to be the candidate to beat. And then as soon as she won the nomination and as soon as the press couldn't just malign her or slander her. They actually had to put cameras and microphones in front of her. She crushed it. And not only did she do it so well that the Democrats refused to debate her, but she's doing it so well that it looks like she's actually pulling Masters, who's the Senate candidate out in Arizona, that she might actually be giving him a boost as well. So that's going to be one of those issues where Democrats thought for sure if Kari Lake was the nominee, they didn't have to worry about Arizona, and they learned the opposite lesson on that one. So that's where we're at when it talks to like Senate and some of the gubernatorial races that we're looking at. Let me talk a little bit about the House. So the reason why we're focused so much on Virginia right now is obviously we're located in Virginia and we kind of know where to go to get some of the best data for those races. But the thing to keep in mind is a lot of the races that we're talking about here, the 2nd district, the 7th district, the 10th district, you can take a lot of the dynamics within those districts and you can project that across the country, that if Republicans are doing well here, they're going to do well in these other areas as well with similar dynamics. And what we're seeing right now is that it's really close. So we don't have enough to, again, if we were going to predict this a couple days ago in the 7th district, it would have been tough. I mean, we were all saying like 50-50. Vega ran a good campaign, but Spanberger knows how to run for office in Virginia.
Well, and one thing to point out is that, Fox News right now has Vega way up. They've got Luria way up.
Yeah, I remember
that. And here's the thing is that we're looking at numbers that are coming in before Fox News can see them. And so one of the things that Christian does is he will look at which counties haven't come in yet, and kind of what he does is he weighs how much of a Democratic vote is going to come in there and whether or not it's going to wipe away a lead that we might have right now. And so that's why Christian currently is pessimistic, even though Fox News still shows Vega way up.
Speaking of which, I got a call to
frustrated
make.
Right now.
Jennifer Wexton is going to win in the 10th. I don't know if any network has called that, but I'll bet any amount of money that Jennifer Wexton will win in the 10th. And the reason why is because when you look at the votes that have been counted, she barely has a lead. But when you look at what's still outstanding, it's ballots that are going to they're probably going to break anywhere from 55 to 65% in her favor. They're mostly early votes, not entirely. They're about 60 to 70% of ballots remaining, is my guess, would be early votes. The remainder are election day votes, but a lot of those election day votes are still coming out of Loudoun County. Fauquier is basically all in, except for early vote.
Yeah. And Faukier's a red area.
Rappahannock is not all in, but Rappahannock is so small that it's not going to make a huge difference. The big problem is that Fauquier is basically all in on election day. Prince William is not all in on election day, and that actually could still help us.
Yeah.
But because the parts of Prince William that are in the 10th are actually the red parts. But between the election day vote and really the early votes that haven't been counted in places like Loudoun and Fauquier for that matter, because early votes, even in a red county like Fauquier, are probably going to be bluer than the county as a whole. That tells me that mathematically here's what happened. I feel like I'm starting to turn into the Young Turks. I told you this before we started the live stream. I was terrified that we were going to walk into this and it wasn't going to be as great of a night as I was thinking it was when I was looking at the turnout throughout the day, and I was very excited throughout the day.
Well, you didn't make a prediction on yesterday.
You didn't make a prediction on the 10th.
That's true. Well, I did actually predict the 10th would be blue, but what happened is that throughout the day, I was very optimistic for Republicans, really until like the last hour or so before the polls closed. Mm-hmm. It really does look like the Democrats, that last minute GOTV effort, they saw the writing on the wall, and they have pulled off in Virginia. I'm not talking about other states. Yeah. In Virginia, it really looks like that they pulled off a GOTV
at least the 10th. Effort. The thing I want to see in the 7th is, again, what we've witnessed that was different from, let's say, 2020. 2020, we were still operating in a world where Republicans did not vote early. We finally cracked some of the code of that in 2021, where Republicans did start voting early. And obviously, if you got more people voting early, you're not going to have as many on Election Day. So the interesting thing for me is going to see, again, we didn't, if you're doing really, really just hard-nosed analysis, we knew that the 10th was going to be very difficult. The fact that it was even as competitive as it was is pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the map right now, and Christian's right. There's definitely some, conservative areas that are still outstanding, but I don't think it's I don't know that it's going to be sufficient.
We had somebody asking about Bob Good, and
the-
we tend to believe that Bob Good's safe.
Yeah, good.
Bob
should be
Good
fine.
should be safe.
Bob Good should be fine at this point. But again, Spanberger is Yesley could still win that race, and Jen Kagan's could still win in the second. But yeah, it's gonna be close. Somebody asked me today, they're like, what is the seventh going to be? And I said it's going to be within 1 point. I said we could be in automatic recount territory with the Virginia 7th district.
Two things. How are things going in Alaska, especially with the Senate race? And then I know some folks up there who have been very perplexed by the ranked choice voting situation. Could y'all speak to both of those?
Yeah, so some states, Maine is a good example of this. Some states have a ranked choice voting system where you're given a ballot and you rank the candidates in order of most favorite to least favorite. There's different ways to do it. You can also put numbers next to them. You could you could have like an instant runoff. Like there's many different ways to do it. But what it means is that you don't just vote for one person. You order the candidates from most preferred to least preferred, if you choose to do so. Not everybody does. Some people just make one mark for somebody and then send it in. But what that does is it means that somebody could lead, right? They could win in what would be called a first past the post system like the rest of the country uses. But when the votes are counted, if they don't get a majority, they have to reallocate the votes from everybody else that didn't win, and then somebody who might have led in the first round ends up losing.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that really makes people mad about ranked choice voting, at least conservatives, because there's been a couple of races where the Republican has won on a plurality, so they didn't have 50% plus one, but they had the most votes in the first round. Well, it doesn't matter. It's if you've ever participated in like a political convention for a nominating contest. And those you usually have to keep going until someone gets 50% plus one. That's the same way ranked choice works. Instead of everyone hanging around and voting again, though, you've already filled out your ballot with this is my first choice, this is my second choice. And what happens is when your first choice gets eliminated from the contest because they don't have enough votes, all of us your second choice gets automatically tabulated. And that is, again, there's positive things about that. There's negative things about that, but Republicans tend to hate it because of what went on in places like Maine and Alaska.
Does ranked choice voting give either side an advantage in the situation like Alaska?
I don't see. It's easy to say that, but in most cases where it's happened, it's Democrats have actually seen benefits from it. But I don't think that it by its nature it gives an advantage to everyone. It's more about voters, understanding that process, being involved in that process and campaigning appropriately. But it does take some getting used to. Sure.
Christian, what about the Alaska Senate race? Any updates there?
We won't have updates there until 3 a.m. I mean, Alaska's not on the other side of the country. They're even past Pacific time.
Wow. Yeah.
The polls won't close there for quite a while, actually.
Yeah. You got to figure there's parts of Alaska that are further west than Hawaii.
So somebody mentioned Rhode Island.
The polls close at 1 a.m. in Alaska.
Okay, somebody mentioned Rhode Island, Paul, here in the comments. And he's talking about the Senate race. And
he might actually be talking about the House race with
it's the House race.
With Fung, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Alan
he
Fung.
says that Fung may pull a House seat away from the Democrats. How's that? Can you provide any backside insight to that?
Fung is actually he's a well-known candidate in that area. I actually knew somebody else that was considering running in that race, and she decided not to, because Fung is someone that, again, he's a very well-known entity within that place. His fundraising was very strong, and obviously this was a year where they actually thought they would have a better chance to be able to win this seat. So I'm not seeing anything. I'm trying to find some good numbers here that we can actually look at and drill down. It's certainly possible. Let me see here. It's certainly possible that was going to be tough, right? Though that would be a major pickup. All right, so here we go. With about, it looks like 10% reporting. It looks like it's kind of neck and neck. Let me see here. All right.
A lot of it depends on whether or not Providence has come in.
With 10% reporting, Fung is up with 56% of the vote. But again, I'm trying to drill in here and see specifically, which precincts are in. And I can't really find anything right now.
Again, in Virginia, we have this amazing website called VPAP where you can see things coming in at the precinct level as they come in. And it's wonderful. And I wish that other states had that. And if you are coming from a state that does have something like that, please drop the link in the comments here so we can
That'd be great.
Tap into that, because we're in Virginia, we know all the little ins and outs here. We don't necessarily know that in other areas, and we would love your information.
Yeah, so I'll say with 10% reporting, it's just way too early to tell. He's up by, it's 56% to 41 right now. There's actually an independent garnering 2% of the vote right now. That'd probably be negligible toward the end. But it's difficult to tell unless you can actually zero in by precincts and determine whether or not they're traditionally Democrat precincts or traditionally Republican precincts.
Okay, I've got the map pulled up. Large parts of Providence haven't reported yet, as well as the southern part of the district along the coastline in southern Rhode Island. What's come in so far is the suburbs of Providence and the northwestern corner of Rhode Island. Those are historically Republican leaning, although Fung is definitely doing better than say Donald Trump did.
Yeah.
So at this point, I think it's still a toss-up. I certainly don't think that anybody. I mean, with only 10% reporting, it's really hard to make a call at this point. It's probably going to take at least like another 30 minutes or an hour or so before we get some more information. It really comes down to Providence, because Providence was, when Democrats drew the lines in Rhode Island, they split the capital of the state in half in order to make 2 safe Democrat seats. But there's so many Republican voters in that western part of the district that Fung is running in that it's more Republican leaning than the other one. And so that, combined with the fact that he's a relatively popular person who ran for governor and almost won in 2014.
Yeah.
Has a long history of activism in the state and involvement in state politics. And especially in this type of environment where independents really decide everything, the reason that Rhode Island is so blue is because there's no Republicans there, but not because there's so many Democrats. There's about as many Democrats as there are independents. It's just the lack of a Republican base is what really hurts the party there. But Fung is basically running as an independent candidate. So if you're pitting independent voters against Democrats, that's how you get that horse race scenario like what you're seeing in Rhode Island. So I still say the jury's out for the district there.
We've got somebody asking for that link to VPAP. If you could drop that in the comments.
I'll drop it right now.
It's it's vpap.org. VPAP.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna drop the page. Okay, so the one I'm dropping right now, this will take you right to the election. So if you go straight to VPAP, they do a pretty good job. They're very easy to navigate and they'll run you into it, but yeah, that'll take it in there. Somebody asked about the Luna race in Florida. Do you got anything on that, Christian?
The Luna race?
Yeah. She's running for Congress and she ran last time as well.
I don't know what race that is.
See. Wait 1 second.
There's so many races.
Yeah, there are
500 and
400 and there's at least 435 for the House.
Yeah.
For the Senate, it's a third of the chamber, so it's going to be either 33 or 34 seats that are up this year. So, a little bit under 500 federal races this year.
Okay, so Luna right now. I think she's going to pull this off. So so let me just say this: 95% reporting. It's 53% to 44%. I don't see how she loses unless. So what happened in my race in 2020 is that it was showing 95% reporting with respect to precincts,
but not votes cast.
But they weren't counting absentee. And what they had done in Virginia that was so frustrating and stupid was that everyone that had voted early, even though they knew what precinct you were representing, everyone that voted early got considered absentee.
Really?
So they could show 95% of precincts reporting and up by 12 points. But then all of a sudden, like tens of thousands of votes that were either mail-in or were absentee or were early votes, they weren't counted toward individual precincts. They were just counted toward that last bucket that usually gets counted at the very end of the election night. And so that's why there wasn't an accurate reflection there. Now with this race, what I'm looking at here, and also assuming that Florida did this a whole lot better than Democrat-controlled Virginia did in 2020, I'll say this. Unless they're doing something weird where they're not counting the early votes already cast or the absentees as part of this, 95% reporting with a That's like an 8-point lead. I mean, that usually means you won.
Okay, so we've got somebody also asking on the side, aside from focusing on results, what are Nick and Christian's thoughts on the machine issues being reported in Maricopa County in Arizona? It's just there are always issues with machines.
So,
and there was even an election official, I can't remember which state it was, who was ousted in just a couple of days ago for messing with things. So it is a thing that happens.
Okay, so let's talk about this real quick. You've actually got some states. In fact, I was talking to one state legislator. I think she was from Tennessee. Don't quote me on that. She had done a lot of good work on this, and she was advocating that we just move back to paper ballots. And what's interesting is a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, paper ballots is going to take forever." No, it doesn't, because we were using paper ballots not that long ago. It's not like that was in the 1800s we were using paper ballots, and we were actually able to get everyone's ballot in and tabulate it very quickly and count it. Obviously, there's most of the stuff that we do right now is fairly automated with respect to the machine processes that we do. It's supposed to make it a lot faster with respect to tabulating results, collating them the way they're supposed to be, et cetera. But what we're also starting to see is that, one, there is always a security risk or a digital security risk, cybersecurity risk whenever you have that footprint. Now, theoretically, you should be able to encrypt it well enough to where that's not a problem. So that's the security threat. The other side is just things breaking down. And do you have sufficient paper ballots to be able to make up for that when you do have a breakdown in the system? And what we're seeing in places like Maricopa County is, okay, this is causing a lot of problems. And because tensions are so high, and I know a lot of people want to pretend like, oh, it's only Republicans that are worried about voter integrity, or it's only Republicans that are worried about, elections integrity.
No, all of a sudden the DOJ is super interested in it.
I'm sorry, Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams, a lot of other people, they're also concerned about it. So there is a debate going on right now in some places. And I will say that the vast majority of state legislators still want to stick with the machines. But there is more and more of a push to either make paper ballots an option where you can say in it, like, I want a paper ballot only and I don't want to. Again, they'll say that, well, the machine just tabulates your paper ballot. You still have a paper ballot. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about taking the machine out of the process and hand counting paper ballots. So, again, as long as you have this, it's still going to be an issue. But there's other logistical issues too to doing the hand counts. I don't think they're as bad as people think they are.
I don't know. I remember the hanging chads, hun. I remember the stress of the hanging chads.
Yep.
Holding it up to the light. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. But that's the state. So I hope that answers your question on that. As far as what is specifically wrong with those machines, I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
She said that she lives in Maricopa County, and that if you vote with the wrong kind of pin, these machines won't count it for several days, and that's what they're saying. So basically, it should work better. It should be able to read it better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and here's the other thing I think would surprise people. And obviously, they learned a lot about this during the 2020 election cycle, but the way that voting laws are established by the states, not by the federal government, with very few exceptions as far as guidelines. But the specifics are managed by the states. Not every county within a particular state will use the same voter systems. What the state usually does is says, okay, here's the criteria. As long as your voting machine meets this criteria, you can use that. And so what it ends up with is something of a patchwork of various voter machines. And then there's also, different processes, but, state by state, depending on how efficient they are, how effectively they run this, it can make a huge difference on whether or not you get election results the night of or whether or not you're waiting several days.
So it looks like some of the Fox News numbers for Wexton and Spanberger's races, VA10 and VA7. Oh, and Luria, let's see, 02. Okay, so Virginia 2. It looks like they're starting to show what Christian was concerned about. You're starting to see the numbers get closer and closer together as we go for the night. So,
well, let me see here. So let's look at the 7th, because I'm still optimistic that we'll take the 2nd. The 7th is one that we all knew was going to be really close. So right now, with 169 of 193 precincts reporting, and only 39.8% of early votes in, Yesli Vega is ahead by 9,777 votes. So what this means is you've got 87.6% of Election Day precincts reporting. So not a whole lot left to go with that. And then you've still got looks like about 60% of early votes. And again, the thing to keep in mind is that typically Democrats do better in the early voting than they do on the election day voting. So we'll just have to see. Could be a late night for the 7th district. Let me see if I can go back and look at the second here. Let's see what's going on in the second. Second district, there's a 19,000 vote lead with 72% of election day precincts in and 10% of early votes in. And to give you an idea what that means, I'm sorry, I'll go back into this other one. What that means is there's about 90,000 outstanding early votes in the second district. And right now the Republicans up by 20,000 votes. So it really depends.
And it really depends on where those votes are coming from.
Well, and it also really depends on how did more Republicans vote early, right? That's, places like Florida have done, I think, a better job in actually getting that data out earlier than places like Virginia have done. So yeah, to give you an idea, Vegas ahead by about 10,000 votes, and there's still roughly, let me see. I can't believe I got to do maths. There's still about 48,000 votes, early votes outstanding in the 7th district.
Adam A. is saying that he likes how Texas electronic voting machines printed out your vote, which is then scanned in, and it leaves a physical record, and you can see that your vote was correct. Mm-hmm. That's nice.
Yeah. All right, Christian, you got an update? Do we want it?
I don't know if I have an update yet. I don't want to pull in Arizona. Remember that?
No.
In 2020, when Fox called Arizona and the Trump campaign
and then it flipped
was outraged because it kept flipping back and forth, and it was a very, very close outcome. And yeah, I don't want to pull in Arizona.
He doesn't want to be the Young Turk. Sorry.
Oh, that's too funny. All right, let's go ahead and do. Okay, so we already told you the races that we're really, really focused on. That's PA, Ohio, Georgia. These are the ones that North Carolina is one, obviously, that we're concerned about, but we're fairly confident the Republican was going to do all right there. So looking at the U.S. Senate right now, again, in Pennsylvania, you've only got 7% of the votes in. Ohio's got 28%. This is another thing that just irritates people, and I understand why. So they're in the same time zone, but it's frustrating that Pennsylvania's got 7% reporting and Ohio's got 28% reporting. Now North Carolina is 50% reporting at this point, and the Republicans down by about 105,000 votes. So we'll see what goes on there. New Hampshire is 14% reporting at this point, and again, he's 20 points down, but without actually looking at the individual precincts, it's hard to tell. By the way, here's a little fun fact for you on election night. New Hampshire actually has one of the largest legislatures in the world. Little New Hampshire. So to give you an idea, a state rep, like I'm a state rep in Virginia, I represent roughly 80,000 people. A state rep in New Hampshire represents like a few thousand. So like the local board of supervisors in Culpeper County, Virginia represents more people. A supervisor would represent more people than a member of the House in New Hampshire.
So why aren't more states set up like that?
I don't know.
Oh, well, that was
I think, yeah, sorry.
so eloquent.
Sorry,
honey.
Well, I mean,
Look,
is there a benefit to doing that in
not
New
everything
Hampshire?
can be profound, Tina. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm ready to make the call. Abigail
which one?
Spanberger will win re-election.
All right,
Gosh,
well,
dang it. Christian.
we're going to fire
We're going to blame
Christian.
you, Christian.
We're going to blame
this.
Christian. This is what he gets. All right, Christian, go ahead and explain why.
By the way, that was not us laughing about that.
Oh my
that was
gosh.
laughing
That was
about
like-
They're
Christian
laughing at me.
blaming
We're laughing at
Christian.
Christian because what'd he do? Did Christian just break something?
No, my chair's tied up with the cords.
All right,
One
I'm
second.
going to say that, okay, Christian's calling it. I'm not yet. I still think Vegas is going to pull it off, and I'm going to let Christian give his reasons why he thinks Spanberger is going to pull this off, and I'm going to give my reasons why I think Vegas still is in it. Go ahead, Christian.
Okay.
I'll be who everybody likes.
When you look at the historical, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
No, just do it. This is why
when you
pay
look
you.
at here's why Spanberger will win. When you look at the historical data in the counties that make up the 7th district, what you find is that over the last 5 to 6 years, across all elections, I'm talking gubernatorial, Senate, presidential, lieutenant governor, attorney general, you name it, any statewide election, what you've seen is the average vote tally in counties like Culpeper, Orange, are about 60-40, which is exactly what Spanberger lost by. She lost 60-40 in those counties to Vega. When you look at the average vote count in Stafford from 2016 to 2020, so you're including the 2016 presidential race, you're including the 2018 U.S. Senate race, you're including the Youngkin win in 2021, as well as Mieres and Winsome Sears, and you're looking at the U.S. Senate race and presidential race in 2020 as well, and the 2017 gubernatorial race. So a lot of statewide elections, right? When you look at the average of the results in Stafford County between all of those elections since 2016, you see that Stafford County ended up voting about 2 to 3 points for the Republican on average across all those elections. Yeah. And that's about the exact same margin that Yesli Vega won by. So you notice that there's a trend developing here, that that Vega is performing about as well as the average of the Republican performance in some of these critical counties, some of these very red counties like Culpeper and Orange, where we live, and some of these swing counties like Stafford, which is a suburb of Fredericksburg to the north. Well, the problem is that when you add up all the counties that make up the 7th district, the average from 2016 all the way to present is about, depending on the math, about a 1 to 2 point Democrat victory. And then when you look at the ballots that are outstanding, my model that I developed actually the day of the election today, I was working on it this morning and this afternoon. I predicted that Spanberger would probably win in the neighborhood of around 30,000 votes from the early vote tally. And when you look at the margin of the difference between her and Vega, when you add in the remaining outstanding early votes that haven't been counted yet in places like Spotsylvania and Prince William, and you add in the election day results that haven't yet been counted in Prince William, first off, in Prince William, it's something like 2 out of every 3 precincts in Prince William that have already been counted for Election Day, Spanberger's outperforming Terry McAuliffe by. And she's outperforming Terry McAuliffe by about 3 to 4 points, which is exactly what she needs to in order to eke out a win. And like I said, that's about 2 out of every 3 precincts. There's some precincts in Prince William that she's underperforming, but on average, she's doing better than she needs to on the Election Day tallies. So if we know that early vote is going against us with the outstanding early vote that's yet to be counted, then the only other thing that we could rely on in order for Vega to hold on to her lead, which is currently, I think, about 10,000 votes, is her doing better with the Election Day vote in Prince William. But the problem is she's not doing better with the Election Day vote in Prince William. So we're getting to a point where we're rapidly running out of places to find votes for her. And that's why I know that some people disagree, and I know that I called this before Fox and before, any of the major places out there, 538 and stuff like that. But I mean, I know the district very well. Mm-hmm. I know the area very well. I've been doing this for many years, not publicly. I've never done this on like a live stream or anything like that.
By the way, the district was written horribly, but
it's a horrible district. We can get into that. But yeah. But like I think I know what I'm doing. I've never really done this publicly. In fact, I'm kind of uncomfortable doing it publicly because usually every year it's me predicting a wipeout for us. But from everything that I'm seeing, it would take a very, very surprising shift with the remaining amount, with all the votes matching up with what we've historically seen. It would take an abnormal historical shift in the remaining outstanding votes for Vega to win. And I don't see any reason why the remaining outstanding votes would be abnormally different from the ones that have already been counted.
All right, so now here's my rebuttal to that. You're fired. Pack up your crap and get it. No, here's my rebuttal.
He's just the messenger.
I know, but you know what? Messengers get shot. That's why they keep saying don't shoot the messengers, because it happened a lot. Haven't you watched 300? Anyway, here's what I'm going to hold out some hope for on this one. Vega's up by 10,000 votes. We've still got about, looks like, 13 No, 23 precincts left to report. Unfortunately, a lot of that is in Prince William, so that's not necessarily very helpful. Here's my prediction. Republicans did better in early voting than we ever thought possible.
If Republicans did better in early voting, that was offset by doing worse on Election Day then. Because when you look
This is not a debate. You got to make your statement. Now I'm making my statement.
Okay, it won't be a debate.
All right.
But
So what I'm saying is that if you know, I'll put it this way. If you look at the counties, right? So all of the red counties that we're talking about, Culpeper, Madison, Greene, Orange, Spotsylvania, almost all of them, like Culpeper, 0 early votes outstanding. Orange County, 0 outstanding. Madison, 0 outstanding. Caroline County, 0 outstanding. Spotsylvania still has 19,566 estimated early votes outstanding. That tends to be a more conservative county, but Democrats tend to do better in early voting. We'll see what happens because Republicans, we had
pushed
our first,
hard on early voting this time.
We had our first real big early voting push in 2021, and we saw some gains in that. And then I talked to a lot more people this year that were far more comfortable voting early as Republicans to see what happens. 0 early votes outstanding in Stafford, King George, or Caroline. Prince William has about 26,000 early votes outstanding. So what needs to happen at this point is she needs to try to maintain as much of that 10,000 vote lead as she can with respect to Election Day precincts coming in. And then we just need to hope that Republicans in Prince William and Spotsy actually, listen to the call to vote early, and we had a much larger percentage because 10,000 vote margin when you've got a little over 40,000 early votes outstanding and probably another, I'm estimating, oh gosh, I don't even know, with how many more precincts in Prince William? Prince William, we got about another 17 or so precincts to go. That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough.
Looks like Luna won in Florida, by the way.
Yeah.
It was called.
Yeah. So Luna won in Florida. So yeah, that's going
We
to be
should probably do it once around the world or once around the country. More time.
now that the races in Virginia that I actually care about, from my point of view, have been called. By the way, we now have the early vote from Spotsylvania, and I'm even more certain now that it's over. Spotsylvania ended up actually barely going for Vega.
On the early votes?
No, the whole county.
No way.
She won it by like less than 10 points. I've currently
She
got
had about 60.
I've currently got 53-46.
Are you looking at
7-point win,
stop.
one precinct outstanding.
Are you on VPAP or are you on State Board of Elections?
VPAP?
Okay,
I've got one precinct outstanding, all early votes counted. She only won it by 6 points, by 4,000 votes. She won.
Okay, yeah, it did just come out.
It like I said, it's over.
53% is tough for Spotsy. Like I did better in Spotsy if I remember correctly.
Okay. We need to do
Those
it
Fredericksburg suburbs, man.
once around the country. Somebody is asking about the gubernatorial race in Michigan.
That is an interesting one. I haven't now that we're done with Virginia, as disappointing as this was in Virginia. I mean, I'm used to disappointment
now get to
in Virginia.
work on all the other stuff.
Now we
Christian,
can look at the
let's go.
rest of the country. So for those of you that have been tuning in with us, and now we get to broaden our scope beyond just the Commonwealth of Virginia to actually look at some races that are taking place in other states.
And the polls are about to close in a few more locations.
I still think Vega can pull it off. I'm just going to say that, but go ahead and move on.
Let me take a look at Michigan.
All right, so we're going around the world here. All right, I'm going to look. Do we got any more questions?
It was about the let me. Oh, you're looking at the questions. Good. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I looked at some questions. I don't think we have anything new at this point. Okay.
Well, fun fact: there was a House of Delegates seat in Guam that went red for the first time in about 30 years.
A win is a win.
Yep.
A win is a win. Oh, man. All right, so for some reason, the Virginia 2nd District, that one, we still got way too many early votes outstanding, but at least Jen Kagan's down there has got about a 19,435 vote lead. Okay, let's go to some of these other ones.
Yeah, we're waiting for
what is
Arizona
the
to close.
deal with Pennsylvania?
I know they're. It looks to me like they're counting only really blue areas right now.
I don't know.
Like Fetterman is Come on, the guy was half asleep.
I'm pulling up this right now. All right, Pennsylvania Department of State. Let's see what you got here
Yeah,
for a website.
7% in.
Yeah, like why is it still 7%?
Those are Philly votes, right?
I mean, is Fetterman counting them personally?
Well, that won't be good.
That was mean. That was mean. I shouldn't have said that.
Somebody says Guam's about to tip over. Was that who was that said they were so worried that it would capsize?
It was a Democrat congressman.
An island would capsize?
It was a Democrat congressman, and he said it. And it's like I remember going like he couldn't have. This had to be some sort. And then you're watching the committee meeting like, oh my gosh, he doesn't know how islands work. It's not a pool toy. All right, come on. Where's the election reports for Pennsylvania? I'm trying to get something a little bit better than what we're just seeing right now on the news. But I'll tell you what, man. I got some buddies in the state legislature. Hey, Representative David Rowe, if you're watching this, y'all need to fix your state's site, right? Or get something that does a better job. Or text me something that I can use because this stinks.
How about Ron Johnson in Wisconsin? Somebody's asking about that.
All right, let me see here.
DeSantis is on the verge of a win unlike anything we have ever witnessed in our lifetimes in Florida.
I love it.
So there we go. Let's get back to happy talk.
DeSantis is up almost by 20 points right now, with 84% of the vote counted.
Again, I
need to see if he's going to... We're at the point now where there's a chance that... this is where I start getting excited because we dealt with the... We're used to disappointment here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, right? But broadening our scope to other states... if these numbers hold, and there's no guarantee they will, I mean, they could definitely tighten with the remaining 15% outstanding, but if these numbers hold, there's a really, really good chance that he's going to flip not just Miami-Dade, but Palm Beach County.
Yeah.
Which is why the DOJ wants to send observers in and watch whatever they're doing, because now all of a sudden they're worried about it.
Let me give some updates on stuff that we do have some decent numbers on. So in Georgia, with 45% of the precincts reporting, we've got 49.8% for Raphael Warnock, 48.4% for Herschel Walker. So that's really close.
And it's only 45%. So can we see who exactly is these votes represent? I'm sorry.
Gosh, I'm sorry. This isn't good enough.
Like, where are these votes coming from?
I don't know. I'm looking at a thing that's just a list right now.
Oh, okay.
All right. And then North Carolina, 53% of the votes in, 50% for the Democrat, 47% for Ted Budd.
I see 48% for Ted Budd.
47.96.
Okay.
New Hampshire, I mean, it's only 15% reporting. I don't know that.
Val Demings is currently in the lead in Palm Beach County by 0.1% with 95%.
That is crazy.
When's the last time Palm Beach went red?
1986.
Wow.
Yeah. So here, okay, this is another one of those things.
Go Florida.
Yeah, this is another one of these things we look for is does leadership within a state, obviously, matter with respect to how people turn out and vote, both in gubernatorials and midterms and things like that. So Ron DeSantis was on the ballot along with all the other Republican candidates. Whereas, in Virginia right here, our congressional candidates are not running with Governor Youngkin. Although I will say Governor Youngkin went completely out of his way. Both him, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, and Attorney General Jason Miyares, all of them went way out of their way to campaign with all of our candidates, but they weren't on the ballot. And there is something to be said for someone at the top of the ticket helping to drive that. But Ron DeSantis, I think, is definitely – Ron DeSantis gets the credit for what's going on in Florida right now, which is just incredible. Yeah, Pennsylvania, man, what is up with that 9%? I'm texting my legislator friend up there right now and asking him, what the heck?
Karen Hamilton in the comments said that we're better than Brett Baer. So, we share a last name, and, she had something nice to say, so I wanted to bring that up.
I appreciate that. That's outstanding.
That's awesome.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, how do I get election numbers from your lesser Commonwealth?
Who are you texting? PA?
Yeah, it's a friend of mine in the state legislature in Pennsylvania.
Oh my God.
Well, they're a Commonwealth too. We've got.
Well, isn't Joe watching numbers right now?
Yeah, Joe should be. Why isn't Joe?
Tell him to feed us some
Joe's
numbers.
a little busy. I mean, he's a campaign manager for a race right now.
Yeah, he's probably.
But for which race? How about all of them? He texted me back. I'm blasting you on YouTube right now. He's a great guy, by the way.
Okay, so somebody's asking about VA2. Christian, do you have any like insight deeper in?
Well, let's take a look. I
votes
haven't
have
been paying attention to it in large part because I was focused on our district here in the 7th. But now that I'm confident with the outcome there, it's very competitive there
Where?
in the 2nd.
VA2.
Yeah. That one, like, again,
It's gonna be very close.
She's still by about 20,000.
There's so much early vote outstanding.
There's like 80% of the early votes still outstanding.
And a lot of times early voting doesn't really favor us. And the reason why it doesn't is because Republicans tend to take pride in going and actually casting their vote at their polling location. And Republicans also tend to be a little bit leery of the process of voting early sometimes. Just not knowing whether or not it's a secure method of voting and what could happen between now and then. But we're really trying to get people to go ahead and do it. And the reason why is because that makes sure that no matter what happens on election day, your vote gets counted.
Yep.
We even have, we have folks that went in and did it because they just wanted to get it over with, and they work or whatever it is. And it really is a good thing because, a family emergency happens or what, and you've got to leave and you can't cast your vote now. So we're trying to get folks to get more into those early voting, but historically Republicans tend to be very leery of early voting. And so that's why these early voting numbers don't usually favor us.
Well, okay, so I did, my buddy got back to me and he said that and the Pennsylvania website, so like the official government website, they do the votes by county, not by district.
Oh.
Well, that's helpful. It doesn't really matter for again, state or for Senate and gubernatorial because, it's all the votes anyways. But when you're trying to like track down some of the numbers for individual congressional races, and all of a sudden you've got split counties, and so now you can say, okay, well, these votes in the county go here, these votes in the county go here. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to look at it. All right, I'm going to look at Politico here. Let's see if they got anything. All right, we're going to go to Ohio. David, I'm going to tell you right now, man, when you win re-election, which I'm sure you will because you're a great guy, you need to fix the voter side in Pennsylvania. Otherwise, I'm going to continually make jokes on how Virginia is the better Commonwealth. I'll do that anyway. But all right, here we go. Voter turnout by, gosh dang, Ohio, similar stuff, man. Get your crap together.
So I'm just going to take a quick opportunity to say, hey, if you're joining us for the first time,
oh yeah,
please hit the subscribe button and join us again because we do this twice a week. We not live. We do the podcast twice a week, and we cover a lot of different topics, and we help folks make the argument on a lot of different topics. Sometimes we've got folks that don't make the best argument for what it is that we believe in, and we want our folks to be really equipped and ready to encounter any question they may have. And so we go through a lot of different topics through here. We have podcasts that release on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's great. It's the same group of people around the table. It's the same. It pretty much looks very similar to this, but it's not live. And so join us. And also, if you've got questions, we also have this volley chat that we do. I'll let Hamilton give you the information on that.
So, like Tina said, thank you for everyone for joining us. We've got a lot of new folks here, probably from all of Nick's shorts that you've seen on YouTube Shorts, which has been fantastic. The channel has really popped off here in the last month, which has been amazing. We've been posting on this channel now for about 2 years, and so we've seen a lot of success in the last month. We appreciate that. So if you are joining us, you've never watched the podcast before, maybe this is your first time joining Team Freitas for a podcast or a live stream like this. This is actually the first live stream we've done in 2 years, and so I was a little bit rough on the beginning with the tech.
But
and
he brought it home for us.
We
Thank
brought
you,
it home,
Hamilton.
and we are here with all of these election results. And so, as Tina was saying, we do have a chat, which is called Volley. And if you go to any of the, I'll put a comment here in the live stream. But I know Christian's got some information he's going to share with us. Do you need to jump in here?
No. You
Break
finish.
in.
You finish.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm going to drop a link here in the chat. Maybe Nick will. Join us there because that is where we are offline chatting with everyone in our Making the Argument podcast community. We have folks send us questions and different things like that, and we're just able to send video messages back and forth for everyone to see. It's really great for you to get to know Nick, Christian, Tina, and myself, and for us to get to know you. That's one of the most valuable things about it. So thank you all for joining us. We're going to get back to the election results now.
Hold
But before we get
hold
to the
on.
election results, I got to say hi to my
Hi,
nephew,
Owen.
Owen. Hi, Owen. We love you, buddy. Tell your parents that we're still very, very mad that they moved you all the way out to Kansas.
Yeah, tell us what's going on with Kansas,
you
Lindsay.
guys,
Come
you
on.
guys could be out here hanging out with us on the homestead, chasing animals, but no, your parents had to move close to. It just hurts a little. It just hurts a little inside. All right, Christian, do you have something?
Ron DeSantis is winning Palm Beach County right now by 3
Yes.
points. Again, no Republican has carried Palm Beach County since 1986. This is the county that voted 2-1 for Al Gore in 2000. In fact, Palm Beach County was the county that was the centerpiece of the election controversy in 2000. The whole hanging chads and butterfly ballots and all of that stuff. Al Gore won about 66% of the vote in Palm Beach.
Wow.
He absolutely slaughtered George Bush. And Palm Beach is a very large county. It's a 100% urban county. It's got about 1.4 million residents. It's very, very racially diverse as well. It's only got, I think, about 53% of white voters. Large Hispanic population, large black population. And again, it's not even a suburban county. It's an urban county. And it's an urban county that has been dominated by liberal politics for almost 40 years, about 35 years. And if DeSantis actually flips Palm Beach County, that is the culmination of a trend that we have been seeing arguably since 2012. It's been about 10 years coming now. What you saw starting in 2012 was when Barack Obama actually carried Florida in his re-election bid. He actually did worse in Palm Beach than he did in 2008. And that was kind of surprising. And then in 2016, Trump did much better in Palm Beach than anybody expected. And then he improved upon that in 2020. He ended up losing Palm Beach only, I think, by about 12 points. And again, so going from a 33-point Democrat victory in 2000 to 20 years later, a 12-point Democrat victory. It has been a steady march to the right for the past 2 decades. And if this holds, again, it's similar to what I was talking about with Nevada, where it's been blue for a very long time, but it's been slowly creeping to the right. And tonight it looks like it finally flipped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great news for Florida. We had somebody ask, they said, was looking at details of Virginia District 10. Fairfax seemed close to going red. Thoughts, am I incorrect? Here's the important part to understand about that. And sometimes it's confusing based off of how you're looking at the data. So a lot of times if you're looking at map data, the way that they'll collate the numbers and stuff like that, they'll say, oh, Fairfax was 48%, and everyone thinks, oh my gosh, Fairfax is super liberal. But if they only represent like a small portion of Fairfax, and it actually happens to be like maybe a pocket of maybe a couple of precincts, that's not representative of all Fairfax. So if they've only got a smaller portion of Fairfax within their district or whatnot, that can be part of the problem. But yeah, there's no way Fairfax was even close to going red as a whole.
All right, so we've got a few new people saying that they came over from the shorts. So thank you,
Oh, well,
everybody
thank you.
who came over here from the short videos. And
The people on
Yep.
the people that came over from shorts are thinking, you know what, I can handle him for like 30 seconds at a time. But when I've got to watch him for more than 30 seconds, he's a real punk. I appreciate you sticking with me, though. It's
that's
kind.
not true.
It's kind. Tina's had to stick with me for like 24 years now.
It's my favorite thing.
Oh, it isn't. Chocolate is her favorite thing. Like I'm third. All right.
Okay, so Redford Outdoors says Texas called all for Republican already. Wait.
That wouldn't be surprising. Beto ran a horrifically bad
Beto?
campaign.
Beto did.
Wait,
Beto
you're
also,
telling me Beto didn't win?
It's crazy. I know he got some last minute celebrity endorsements, which apparently didn't do as well in Texas as we all thought that a celebrity endorsement would. But
Well, I mean,
it
worked so well for Liz Cheney.
That's because Liz Cheney rolled out Kevin Costner's endorsement thinking that she was getting John Dutton's endorsement. It's like, nah, it's not the same thing. It doesn't work that way. Okay, let's look at, so I got, by the way, my buddy in Pennsylvania did win his state reelection. Apparently, this hurts a little bit right now. He said, my opponent missed the ballot access, so it will take a while to count the write-in votes. Well, all I can say, David, is you're lucky I wasn't running a write-in against you.
That's right. For those of you who don't know, a few years back, Nick ran the largest write-in campaign in Virginia history and beat the Democrat opponent with 54%, or was it 56% of the vote? It was
more like 56. We won by a little over almost 15 points.
It was like a 15-point spread.
Okay,
so
but before
that
that,
was pretty good.
Before you look at that and be like, oh my gosh, that's impressive.
No, let's just stop there.
I was the incumbent. I did screw up with my paperwork, and so I had to run the write-in. And my team did an excellent job, and it was horribly embarrassing, but it's been one of those things where when something like that happens and it's super embarrassing and then you win anyways, you've got to double down on the jokes that everyone makes about you.
That's
Otherwise you might cry in your beer. Okay, so just to let you know right now with Ohio, we're still only, from what we can say right now, still only looking at about 39% of the vote in. And it's like 51% Ryan, 48.7% Vance. We got a long way to go on that one, but that's one of the important ones that we're really keeping an eye on.
Can I just point out, it is with the exception of some states like Florida.
Yeah.
It's starting to look like the pollsters did. I had a gut feeling that this might have happened. It's starting to look like the pollsters did actually overcorrect for Republicans.
Don't tell us that.
And
not in Florida.
No, Florida was an exception. I mean, Florida. I wish I was in Palm Beach County with my family right now, live streaming from there, because it's probably a great night to be a Republican in Florida. I mean, again, history has been made. DeSantis is on track to win Miami-Dade by an 11-point margin.
Yeah.
Like, unbelievable.
All right, so what's your
victory?
next point?
But outside of Florida, it's starting to look like that. So what happened was that you saw this especially in 2016, and you also saw it in 2020, but it was overlooked in 2020 by the general public. What happened was that pollsters were basically expecting that, Democrats are going to win in a landslide, right? They predicted that in 2016, and they predicted that in 2020. And what happened? Well, Republicans won in 2016, and even though they lost in 2020, Trump did way better than the polling said. I remember seeing polls that said something like Wisconsin was going to go 16 points to the left in 2020. And Trump ended up coming within recount territory in that state. And so you're talking about a massive polling error. And the reason that it's not talked about anymore is because A, the media doesn't want to admit that they screwed up, and B, we technically got it right. I'm sorry, but if you predicted a 16-point victory and instead you got a 0.16% victory,
don't go patting yourself on the back.
Don't go patting yourself on the back. You did something wrong there. You were literally like a rounding error away from getting the election result incorrect, despite the fact that you were predicting an absolute landslide.
Blowout.
So
by the way, Ted Budd is now up in North Carolina.
Okay.
That's
also,
good.
Wisconsin with 0% reporting has Johnson up at 66.5%.
It's probably reporting some
with
like
0% reporting.
Some random farm in cheese country up in the north.
They've reported his mother's house.
But so what I'm trying to say is that potentially, and we won't know the truth of this until probably a few days or weeks out from now, but what I suspect is that a lot of polling firms overcorrected because they didn't want to be embarrassed again. Because you can only lie so often until the actual votes are counted, right? You can say all day long, I think Democrats are going to win in a landslide, but if they don't win in a landslide, you lose a lot of credibility. If you're consistently predicting a 16-point Democrat win.
So you think they overcorrected?
I think they overcorrected out of fear of getting it wrong again, because 2 times in a row they got it horrifically wrong. And so what do? You weight the polls in favor of the Republicans, not everywhere, but in some places, like we saw in Virginia, where the results were more in line with what the fundamentals suggested rather than what the polling suggested. And same thing in New Hampshire, where Republicans are currently trailing in the U.S. Senate race. And in doing so, well, worst case scenario, you get it wrong, but at least you get it wrong in favor of the Republicans. Preferably you get it right, by overcorrecting for Republicans. But if you overcorrect too much and you get it wrong, well, at least you can then go back and say, well, I'm saving face because at least I'm wrong in both directions rather than consistently being wrong in favor of the Democrats when in reality they're doing much worse than I'm predicting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Christian. We really appreciate that insight.
All right.
That was wonderful.
So, okay. I'm sorry. We're looking at a few of these things that are starting to.
I want to read some comments
come
here.
through. Yeah, you should.
Fetterman, wow, what's going on? And let's take a look at what's going on in Pennsylvania.
In the Fetterman race, what's that? In the Fetterman race, they are finally starting to report.
There's so few votes that have been counted.
I do not get what's going on.
14% counted? We're basically done in Virginia. What have they been doing? Is it like an elderly couple in like Carbondale that's just sitting there like counting all the ballots themselves?
I told you, Fetterman is counting his own ballots. That's what's going on right now.
That is the way it looks. Which, that's concerning.
I really don't understand how Pennsylvania could be this far behind right now. Although we did get some information from like a major precinct up in, I think it's Pennsylvania 8, that they've been having issues all day long with the precincts with respect to opening on time. And lo and behold, it's a red precinct. Okay, so yeah, I for the life of me, I do not understand why this is taking so long.
Someone just said that VA6 was just called for Klein. I mean, that's
that's not surprising.
By the congratulations to Ben, my former colleague in the Virginia House of Delegates. Good
Ben
dude,
is
Klein.
solid. That is a guy you can count on to vote correctly every time.
Absolutely.
I don't think he has any bad votes. Does he? I don't know.
I can't name any.
I don't think so. He's just tried and true. That is one guy that you can just count on. He will vote the right way.
It is really, really close in Georgia right now.
Yeah, it is.
59% counted. The problem is that we don't really know where the remaining votes are outstanding.
Yeah.
It's looking like there's actually a lot in North Georgia, which is really good for Herschel Walker because North Georgia is, as red as it comes. North Georgia is like as red as Southwest Virginia is.
Yeah.
But the Atlanta suburbs, not really surprising that every single county in the Atlanta suburbs, the inner Atlanta suburbs, I'm not counting like Cherokee and Forsyth and stuff like that, but in Hall County, but like the inner Atlanta suburbs are definitely coming in really strong for Warnock. Continuing with this trend that we talked about on the podcast, actually, shortly before this election, where I said that Georgia was the state that I was least confident about.
Yeah.
Going to the Republican side. I had that as a tilt Republican.
Well, and this was also something too where so two things. One is the kind of the donut theory where and we can get into that a little bit later, but to give everyone an idea, Christian's actually been working on this theory for a while, and it really checks out when you start to look at the numbers from like 2016 on. And it's the whole idea that some of the deep blue urban areas are getting a little bit more conservative. Some of the suburbs are getting more liberal, and then the rural's red. But the other thing too, and explain this more, Christian, where you were talking about states that have kind of like just one large urban area that kind of dominates the state end up being a little bit more problematic than some states that have two large urban areas, and that seems counterintuitive.
Yeah. So when you look at a couple examples, Georgia, Minnesota, and Washington State are some of my favorites, as well as Illinois. Those are the four that I look at the most when it comes to states that have a very large urban area that is. There's Nick eating pizza.
Way to go, producer.
We didn't cut away from
Way
Nick
to get that
eating
camera
pizza.
off me in time.
And now
I was too busy reading everyone's
Tina on her phone.
That's okay.
So to wrap up what I mean by donut theory. So when you look at some states, the states that I think are the best example of a state where there's one large urban center that basically runs the state. The classic example is Illinois, right? Chicago runs Illinois, It's not the state of Illinois. It's really the state of Chicago, right? And what you see is that states where there's one urban area that overwhelms the rest of the state in terms of population usually are left-leaning states or states that are moving towards the left. Minnesota is a good example. Minnesota has not voted for a Republican since Richard Nixon. Illinois is a good example. It hasn't voted for a Republican for president since the 1980s. Washington State is a good example. Similar case there. Georgia was the exception. For many, many years, Georgia was a Republican state. It had been since Jimmy Carter, since the Jimmy Carter era. So since Reagan onwards, it had been a Republican state. But what you noticed is that as the Atlanta suburbs grew and got bluer at the exact same time, it had shifted the state rapidly towards the left. In fact, so much so that I remember in the summer of 2020, I was writing Facebook posts predicting that Georgia would flip blue. And I remember getting into fights with friends of mine that were basically like, Christian, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm sitting here like, I'm not just making this stuff up. Yeah. Like, I don't want Georgia to go blue. I'm not sitting there rooting for Joe Biden. But, I mean, the math is the math. When you look at Cobb County and Gwinnett County, which are two major suburban counties around Atlanta, these are counties that a decade ago or 2 decades ago were more Republican than this state was. These are counties that were voting for Republicans by like 20 or 30 points. And by the time you got into 2016, in Cobb County's case, it was split even with the state. It was just as, in fact, it was actually to the left of the state, and it was even with the entire country in terms of its partisan index. And so what you were seeing there is that some of these large suburban counties that were basically the heart of conservatism, the heart of like the Reagan coalition in the 1980s, like you walked into Gwinnett County in 1980 and you threw a stone, or at least 1984. 1980 was a little bit different because Carter was beloved in Georgia. But 1984 onwards, you walked into a place like Cobb or Gwinnett and you threw a stone, you couldn't hit a Democrat. You would only hit Republicans because these places were overwhelmingly Republican strongholds. But they had gotten bluer and bluer and bluer as the Democratic Party increasingly became the party of relatively wealthy, college-educated suburbanites.
And interestingly enough, when you talk about throwing stones and hitting Republicans, that actually does happen a lot in Democrat-controlled urban areas.
That's true. Hey, we've got people asking for, like, an update on Alaska and New York.
So Alaska, I cannot give any update. In fact, we're probably not going to be able to tonight because Alaska will not close until 1 a.m. Like the polls are going to be open until most people on the East Coast are asleep.
But with New York, is there anything of note that, because I know that there were a few races that were kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'll take a look at New York. Give me 1 second.
All right. Okay, good. All right. So also, if there's any questions in the comments, also welcome anybody that's brand new coming in. I did this just a few minutes ago, but please, if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. We would really appreciate that.
Also, give everyone an update. Like Jen Kagan's is lead. So 91.9% of Election Day precincts are in. And she's up by about 20,000 votes. But there is still about 80,000 early votes outstanding. So, again, District 2, that's going to be a close one in Virginia. We'll see what happens.
We've got some folks asking about California as well.
California won't be in until much later. Yeah. California's on the West Coast.
And we can.
I mean, their polls don't close until 10 p.m. our time, right? And that's assuming it's 7, but I think they have some areas where they close even later.
Yeah, and well, the issue here, let me bring something up here.
Like for example, Arizona hasn't closed yet either. That's a state that people should really be looking forward to because there's a very competitive gubernatorial election there, but there's also a very competitive Senate election. And this is a Senate election that could potentially decide the outcome of who controls the upper chamber of Congress. Blake Masters has trailed in almost every single poll that has been out in the last month or so, but what you've noticed is that Mark Kelly is really struggling to get 50% or more in some of these polls. I think he's only done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And there's a trend line. This doesn't happen all the time, but there's a trend line that when an incumbent senator, especially in a midterm environment where his party's playing defense, incumbent senators that struggle to break 50% in the polls, they don't always lose, but statistically they're more likely to lose than not. There's enough exceptions to that rule that I can't say it's an ironclad, say, guarantee that Mark Kelly's going to lose. Mm-hmm. I don't think at all there's an ironclad guarantee. In fact, statistically, in some ways, Mark Kelly is probably more likely to win, but he's a lot less likely to win than a lot of the pundit class on places like 538 and stuff like that are predicting, in large part because like I said, just because a senator is leading in every single poll doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot if he can't break 50% himself, because he's usually better known than his challenger.
Yeah.
Or she, if depending on who the incumbent is. But I think I personally actually had Arizona as a tilt Republican race.
Yeah.
In contrast to a lot of people like 538 that said that it was a tilt Democrat race. And again, it could very well go to the Democrats, especially if the results that we saw in Virginia, for example, replicate elsewhere and it becomes a little bit disappointing of a night.
So let's clarify for some people real quick on what we're seeing, because I think a lot of people that were tuning into this were expecting that there was going to be a pretty significant red wave across the board. And here's what we're actually seeing.
Hamilton.
here's what we're actually seeing. In Florida, massive red wave. Like everything that we thought, like the red tsunami, if you're in Florida right now, that happened, right? If you're in Virginia right now, that did not happen. And it is not happening. Right now, what it's looking like is our best chance to pick up a seat will be the 2nd Congressional District, which is Jen Kagan's running against Loria down there. The 7th district is still, again, Christian thinks at this point there's not enough votes for Vega to pull it off. I still think it's possible. I'm holding out hope. And then the 10th is going to go to Wexton at this point. So there's 2 races in Virginia that are still kind of out there. One very close. The other is, we'll see what happens with some of the early voting. And those are the 2 states that we really have to go off of right now, based off of the numbers that we've seen. The other states that we've been watching, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, we're only looking at, like, Pennsylvania's got 12% of the precincts in right now.
Very, very little.
Pennsylvania is just trying to get made fun of right now with how difficult it is for them to be able to get their information out. Ohio, I think, is in the 30 percentiles they're at 41% right now, very, very close, like 50.7 to 49.3 between Ryan and J.D. Vance over there. When you look at North Carolina, they're over 50% in their overall numbers. But again, incredibly close between Ted Budd and the Democrat. So what we're seeing is Virginia is kind of maintaining something of a status quo with what we already have, with a potential for 1, maybe 2 pickups at this point. But there's also the chance, this is the other thing we got to consider, there's also the chance that we don't see any significant change whatsoever within the Virginia congressional delegation. Florida, tsunami, and then we just don't know in the other states right now. So it's become very, very difficult to be able to give you guys some good predictions on what's going to happen because, again, for the people in MSNBC that was like, oh, this is all fake and there's actually going to be a blue tsunami. Yeah, no. But by the same token, some of the more bold predictions for Republicans, at least on the Senate races and then some of the congressional ones, not as good as we would have liked. So we'll just have to kind of see what happens. But to give you an idea of again some of the things that Christian was talking about right now and some of the things that we're really looking for. So we get asked about California. The thing you need to understand is that barring the direct intervention by God, right? You're going to see Democrats winning, the statewide races. The congressional races that we're really looking at over there are races like Mike Garcia, because that's a race that honestly Democrats should win. And if they're not able to keep that, if Mike's able to pull it off, that obviously bodes very well. The other 2 races that, again, the ones that we would stay up for when you start going out to those more West Coast races, Arizona and Nevada. With Alaska, obviously there's some questions with the congressional seat up there and the Senate race. I don't know. I don't know enough about the actual situation on the ground to be able to get kind of like an instinct feel for it. I don't know that we're going to see anything crazy going on in Alaska that would give us any sort of indication about kind of the mood across the country. That's not true, again, of places like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, especially Arizona. And I keep going back to this, but it really is because I didn't know who Carrie Lake was. All I knew is that every report I saw, to include from some Republican sources, was, oh gosh, if Carrie Lake wins, we're done. We're never going to win that state. And that has been, out of all the candidates I feel lied to about, Carrie Lake is the one I feel the most lied to about in the primary and everything else, because the moment she got up and started, speaking, and again, when the press could no longer ignore her, Ron DeSantis does an excellent job with the press, right? As a sitting governor, does an excellent job with the press. I can't think of anybody else that does a better job. As a candidate, I don't think anybody has handled the press better than Kari Lake.
She's very disciplined.
I don't think anybody handled. Well, it's not even discipline, right? Because I've seen disciplined candidates that do nothing but stick to talking points.
True.
And that's it. You ask them a question about their environment, and if their job is to pivot toward, whatever taxes, then they say, environment, good. You know what we really need to do, Bob, is lower taxes, right? Like, that's their shtick. And a disciplined candidate can do that. No, what Kari Lake is good at is thinking on her feet in the moment, and not only that, but recognizing a setup when she sees one. I saw a reporter not long ago try to say, hey, this was a mother, like a grieving mother, had this to say about you and did a commercial for your opponent. What do you say to that? And a lot of candidates would have gotten tongue-tied in that moment or wouldn't have known what exactly to do or to say. And Kari Lake just handled it so beautifully by essentially saying, like, look, that is a mother that has lost a child. And any mother that's been through that, you realize that is something that you deal with for the rest of your life. And so the thing I would say is, I'm not going to say anything that would question her sincerity or question her passion or conviction on this particular issue. But I will say this, and then she did just such a good job of ignoring an obvious, a question that I don't think was asked by a reporter who genuinely cared what that mother was feeling. I think they wanted to see if they could get a gotcha moment out of Kari Lake. And everything the press told me about Kari Lake before she won her primary was she's the sort of person that would have said something stupid in that moment. And the exact opposite was true. And again, this is the reason why I hammer on this so much. Again, for those of you just tuning in, the whole point of making the argument is we're big believers that it's not good enough to, as a candidate, it's not good enough as even an advocate, to think the right things or vote the right way. You owe it to the values that you have, to your kids, to your community, your country, whatever you want. You owe it to be able to effectively advocate and talk about the things that you care about. And I'm sorry, but we've got a lot of Republicans that are either not very good at it or they dodge the press because they know the press is, trying to get them hung up on something. But that's not good enough. The way that you're actually going to make a good argument that works within the culture, that starts to get people to listen to what you have to say and consider you. And really, it's not even about considering you. It's about considering the ideas. The only way you're going to be able to do that is if you can go into difficult situations and perform well. And I've just been super impressed with Kari Lake's ability to be able to do that.
It's not just performing well, but it's actually just being genuine.
Yes.
One of the things I noticed about her is she's extremely polished and well-spoken. And that's no surprise because she was a news anchor.
News anchor, I think. Yeah.
But one thing I noticed with some female candidates, and okay, I can say this because I am a female and I have been a candidate before,
True story.
is that a lot of times when they're speaking or when they're giving a speech, they can really start to sound shrill. They're really passionate, but then they can sound shrill if they're not careful. And Kari Lake does a really, really good job with lowering her voice, like deepening her voice a little bit to round out those harsh, things. And I know that sounds really superficial, but it really does matter because when sound hits your ear, it gives you a certain type of feeling. And I really appreciate somebody who can, passionately make themselves understood without sounding high-pitched and shrill.
Yeah.
So we had a question from Brandon about thoughts on the Michigan gubernatorial election.
I'm looking at the House races right there.
First off, it's very, very close right now, but there's only 10% in. What I'm really looking for, because we don't have enough in for me to say who's going to win, but I can tell you what I'm looking for. What I'm really looking for is the Grand Rapids area and the northern suburbs of Detroit. So places like Oakland County, and even further north than that, like Pontiac and Saginaw, the Flint, for example. These are like old industrial towns that have really been hit hard by deindustrialization, high levels of unemployment. These are places that were basically Trump territory that once you get north of Oakland County, those are places that historically have been Democrat strongholds, but they had zoomed to the right when Trump came along. And if Republicans can hold their gains in those places while keeping their losses in places like Grand Rapids, which was a traditionally Republican stronghold that then moved to the left when Trump came along, if they can keep the gains in the places that Trump improved in while mitigating the places that Trump decreased in. That's how you end up flipping the state. So the two places.
Which counties are you watching?
It's basically Kent County, Saginaw County, any county like north of Oakland County, which is the major suburb of Detroit. That's just to the north of Wayne County, where Detroit is. The ones that are on my radar really are like Kent County and Saginaw County. Saginaw is historically overwhelmingly Democrat stronghold that suddenly became like a key toss-up county when Trump came along.
The reason I ask is because I've got a map up right now. So let me shoot this over to you real quick so you can kind of take a look at it, because you know Michigan better than I do. Come on. All right, go ahead and check right now.
Oh, you sent me something?
I sent you something in Slack, yeah. Because I've got it. It's Detroit Free Press is what I'm looking at right now, because on the other sites I'm looking, they don't have anything up.
Yeah, it seems in line with it. So like the counties that you're going to look for are Kent County, which is a large, relatively rectangle-shaped county that's in the western part of the state.
It's a large.
And then Saginaw County is the other one that I mean, you could also argue Bay County.
So Kent County only has 2.9% of the votes in right now.
Yeah, it's very early days. Now, Saginaw has 32% of the vote in. So there's actually a larger chunk there, and currently Dixon is leading there. Macomb County as well is another one that needs to be looked out for. It's a blue-collar suburb of Detroit that's immediately to the north of it. It's very close to Canada. It's very unique.
Which one is this?
Macomb County. It's to the right of
Macomb's got
Oakland.
0.15%.
Yeah, there's very little in there. That is a county that I would look forward to, because that's another one that historically was a Democrat county and became a Trump stronghold when he came along. And Macomb is very interesting because most suburbs, when you think of suburbs, you think of white collar, college educated, upper middle class, in some cases upper class. Macomb County is a blue county suburb. What happened in after deindustrialization in Detroit in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of those factories moved to places like Macomb. And so a lot of those workers that were living in Detroit, they just moved into the suburbs. But it was the same type of industry that was powering Detroit. And so the demographic makeup in terms of like workforce participation and the same problems that the Rust Belt in general is dealing with is very similar to Macomb. But Macomb's a large county. It's got like something like 800,000 residents. That is, in my opinion, basically a must-win county for Republicans. If they want to be able to flip the state, they have to carry that county. They also have to carry Kent County. Those are two counties that, in my opinion, are just absolute must-wins.
All righty. Well, there you have it. You heard it here first.
I love Michigan's political geography.
We're seeing a little bit more information coming in. I'm looking at Pennsylvania now again, 21% reporting, and now the numbers are starting to get a little bit closer, but still not where we want them.
Karen said, what are we looking at next to keep the predictions that I made on the podcast strong?
That's exactly what I was going to say. So one of your predictions was about Florida. And then what are we looking to next in order for
now it's like I would have said Pennsylvania, but or
they don't
want
to count the votes in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so but just to remind everyone which ones you made the predictions on and what we're looking toward next. And also, if you could let people know, in the previous podcast, you mentioned what we need in order to get back the Senate and in order to take the House. Okay. So how are we looking on that front?
And just to answer Jimmy real quick, yes, I am still a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. The poor people of the 30th district are still stuck with me as their representative.
We love you so much. We wrote your name in. So the states to look out for, I'll just start with that, especially for those that are still that have recently tuned in, that haven't been with us since the beginning. The states to look out for tonight are New Hampshire, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada. And out of those
I'm so proud of you for saying Nevada correctly.
You beat it into me. Out of those 5, Republicans currently only hold one of them. And that one is Pennsylvania, but it's an open seat. And so you've got Oz versus Fetterman there. Neither are an incumbent. Fetterman is the lieutenant governor, and he's a Democrat. And what I'm looking for at this point is can Republicans avoid a runoff in Georgia? I still think there will be a runoff in Georgia. My prediction was the runoff would ultimately end in a Republican victory if it was a red wave year. So I had Georgia's tilt Republican, but I was definitely and I still kind of feel this way, that Georgia could be heading towards a runoff. So that's what we're looking at with Georgia is a runoff going to take place? In Pennsylvania, I had Oz winning, but I mean, until they actually count some votes, it's all pure speculation at this point. I also had Republicans flipping Arizona and Nevada. The problem is that Nevada and Arizona, we haven't actually, the polls haven't even closed there yet. So we're
saying
actually,
we may not actually get to see that tonight.
Well, it's not that we won't get to see it tonight. It's that we're going to get to see it very late.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like Alaska where, I mean, they don't even close the polls until 1 a.m. and then it's going to be another hour or so to count anything, especially in a state like Alaska. But I mean, on the East Coast, it really is coming down to Pennsylvania and Georgia. Like, those are two that we really need to be looking out for.
You have a question,
Will Francis O'Rourke run for a fourth defeat in the future?
By the way, just a fun
I
fact,
love it.
Beto O'Rourke got his high school career in my district.
Oh, he went to Woodbury Forest.
He went to Woodbury Forest.
This is not a prediction, but it is certainly a wish. I hope so. I hope this man just runs over and over and over again because he's a sponge that sucks up money from the Democrat establishment that thinks this is the year that we're going to flip Texas. And then he gets blown out of the water. I hope he runs again. I hope he pulls a Charlie Crist. I hope that he changes parties and runs as an independent. Maybe he'll try to run as a Republican one day, realizing that he can't win otherwise. Surely he'll lose that nomination if he does. But I would not put it past him to run again. But you can only lose so many times in a row.
What is that, a challenge?
No, we're not.
You tell Beto O'Rourke he can't lose so many times in a row. He's like, oh, really? Well, I'll see that challenge.
I mean, Charlie Crist is certainly trying to lose as many times as he can in a row.
You tell Beto O'Rourke he can't lose several times in a row, and he looks at that as like, I'll show you what I'm made of.
I also want to say my favorite prediction that I got right was Red Palm Beach County. No, I ran a poll on Twitter for this, and it was like overwhelmingly in favor of Palm Beach staying blue. And I remember like thinking to myself, no, it's gonna flip.
You told him, Christian. You told him.
I feel so great about that because that was that's probably the one prediction that I made that I don't think anybody in the entire country made. Because there's a lot of people that thought that like Republicans would flip Nevada or Arizona or Georgia.
Well, there's a lot of races you can kind of predict that are pretty safe to predict. I mean, Bob Good, he's going to win. We know it.
Morgan Griffith.
Exactly. Some of these people, this is not a surprise to us.
But that's the thing, because Palm Beach was a surprise. Like that's a really gutsy call. That hadn't happened in my lifetime.
Yeah, you called it
No,
upset.
we're giving you full credit.
Yeah.
You were gutsy. You were gutsy and you were correct, Christian. Don't worry, you still have a job here. It's okay.
He called what is an upset. So it is something that's completely not expected, and you called it. That's pretty good stuff right there.
Like, for instance, I called that Wyoming would probably be conservative, and I feel like I deserve a lot of credit for that.
You do. You know what that reminds me of? There's so many pundits out there. I love the way that they do this. When you're on the internet, there's so many pundits that are out there. They're like, this election cycle, we accurately predicted 97% of all races. And then you look at it, and it's 97% of the 97% didn't even have a challenger.
Yeah.
Or we're in a seat or a state that voted 30 points for one side or the other. That's not a hard prediction to make. You could know nothing about elections, about models, about trends, about politics in general. And with 5 minutes of research, you could accurately predict 90+% of all races in any given election cycle, simply because most districts and states are inherently uncompetitive. Your district, for example, I could predict yours all day long. Even when your name's not on the ballot, I can predict that you'll win because it's such a conservative district.
It's not because I'm just such an excellent candidate.
Well, it certainly helps that when that's the other thing too. That it's always, if you're ever in a contest with election predictions and you don't know which way it's going to go, just vote for the incumbent. Yeah. Not actually go into the polling booth and vote for the incumbent, but if you're in a contest to predict the outcome of something and you don't, it's a coin toss and you don't know who's going to win. The safe bet is usually that the incumbent wins because most incumbents do win re-election.
So back over to these House races that are
looks like we got some good stuff coming in the Senate too.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up in Ohio is there's a lot of blue so far in Ohio. What does that mean?
Well, I'm looking at Ohio right now, and it's looking at me like it's R+3, as far as what they're estimating based off of the current numbers they got. Same thing with North Carolina.
Right. No, I'm not saying.
You're looking at the actual map.
I'm looking at the numbers that are currently in. So obviously this has to do with what areas are being counted right now.
So when you look at what has come in, I'm just looking at it right now, and I can tell you that there is effectively nothing, almost nothing in the Cincinnati suburbs that have come in. So those are like Butler County. I can't remember the names of all the counties off the top. I failed that test. I can't remember the names of the 3 suburban counties that surround Cincinnati.
Never mind, you're fired again.
But there's 3 counties that surround Cincinnati. By the way, fun fact, the Cincinnati metro area is one of the few metropolitan areas in the United States that is Republican leaning when you include the city.
That is nuts.
Not the suburbs alone. The suburbs alone are overwhelmingly Republican, like 65+% Republican. But when you include them and the city, they're still Republican leaning. It's very rare for you to find a metropolitan area where when you take not just the suburbs, but the inner urban core itself, and you add them all together, and the totality of that is still Republican leaning. Like, for example, the Cleveland metro area is very Democrat, even though the suburbs around Cleveland are much more Republican than actual inner city Cleveland. Same thing with Virginia.
The question we have, though, is are we on par with where we need to be for your prediction to come true? Is it too soon to know?
So as I look at places like Franklin, Cuyahoga, Hamilton County is where Cincinnati is, there's still a lot that's outstanding, like over 60% of the vote in each of those 3 counties. And those are the 3 urban counties. That's where Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland are. There's still a lot outstanding, but when I'm looking at in terms of vote tally, it's probably not enough for Tim Ryan to pull it out.
Okay, let's do this. Tim
Which
Ryan's
is
the Democrat.
good.
Tim Ryan's the Democrat.
He's the Democrat.
There was another one.
Okay, real quick. I want to go down to Georgia here for a second,
Okay.
because Georgia actually has like a 63% of precincts reporting right now, and it looks like a good portion of like Atlanta, Macon, Savannah, Augusta is in, which is more of your blue areas, and there's some red areas still outstanding. Right now, Brian Kemp is just, 53% to 46%. I don't.
Shellacking.
Yeah, it's just bad. Herschel Walker is actually up, but he's up by like 0.2% right now. And so that's the part where, again, we'll get Christian here to kind of look at some of those maps and see what he thinks. But when I'm looking at the areas that are underreported right now or no results yet, we have, it looks like fairly decent results from some of the within the urban areas that we would expect. But I think Brian Kemp's going to win this one, which is not really a shocker to anyone. That's not fair. For us to be sitting here this early in the night saying, yeah, Brian's probably got this. That is not how people imagined this was going to go down 5 months ago.
No.
Stacey definitely didn't think.
Stacey still thinks she's the governor of Georgia. So she's very shocked right now that she might also not again be the governor of Georgia.
Speaking of governorships, we are on the cusp of Ron DeSantis breaking 60% of the vote in Florida.
Yeah.
What?
So right. Well, this goes back to our point.
That's
so
awesome.
let's go ahead and go through the line on the East Coast here on ones that we've actually got some decent data for. So with 63% in Georgia, Herschel Walker is barely ahead. Brian Kemp's doing well. In North Carolina, with 67% reporting, Ted Budd is barely ahead, 50.5% of the vote. In Ohio, with 50% reporting, J.D. Vance is barely ahead with 51.7%. Pennsylvania, gosh dang, man, get your crap together. 27% reporting, Fetterman's at 53.9%, but that's not even worth mentioning at this point. And then Wisconsin, we only got 28% voting. So what we're starting to see is as the night goes on, it looks like things are looking a little bit better for Ted Budd, a little bit better for J.D. Vance, a little bit better for Herschel Walker. The big what if here is that without being able to look at individual precincts, it becomes really hard to determine which votes are still outstanding. And as I'm looking here at various Google Maps and things like that, it's just showing me these wide, hey, we've got some results from this county. That doesn't tell me anything. I need to know how many precincts are outstanding. So that's what we're waiting on to give you a better report. But, hey, I'd rather be ahead than behind. And right now, Herschel Walker, Ted Budd, J.D. Vance, they're all ahead.
Okay, so quick question. Ohio, is that a pickup? I can't remember.
No, that will be a hold.
That's a hold, and we need to hold that.
It's a must hold.
And we need to hold Pennsylvania.
Yes. Or if we lose Pennsylvania, then we need to flip 2 other Senate seats that are held by Democrats.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Kemp is poor Stacey Abrams. But again, they're already coming out and explaining how this election was stolen from her because when she talks about election problems, it's perfectly okay. If you talk about them, you're an insurrectionist. So just make sure you.
I thought it was really funny how they all completely forgot about 2016 and how they were like throwing things through windows and
so I'm going to stop you
burning
right there.
things
The
down.
fact that you brought that up means you're an insurrectionist and possibly a bigot. So
probably. Okay,
just
hold
watch
on.
yourself.
Let's talk about my bigotry real quick.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding.
So do you have something to tell me, hon?
I have an awesome shirt. Move your beer.
Uh,
I don't know if people can read it.
oh yeah.
Can you see it? Let's see. I gotta get higher.
It says womanhood is not a costume.
There we go.
All right.
You're welcome.
What's that in
everybody.
reference to?
What?
I don't know. Ask Matt Walsh.
Let's
He's
see
the
if
only one that knows.
Let's see if the folks in the comments understand it. I'll bet they do.
Yeah. All righty. All right, Christian, hurry up. Say something interesting.
I've actually got a question that I want to ask the chat. Is there a particular race that you have been following this entire time? It could be one that we've already called, by the way. Is there a particular race that you've been following that, prompted you to actually want to tune into this live stream?
Karen says the night is young. Suitcases could still come rolling into Georgia. This is true. Ask us how we know. We know all about mismarked thumb drives with provisional ballots on them.
I don't want to relive it.
Let's not.
Well, there's 98.4% of election day precincts reporting in the Virginia 7th district. There's still 30% of early votes out. Vega's ahead by 2,700 votes at this point.
Okay.
All right.
Oh man, Palm Beach County, you look gorgeous in red.
Christian is so happy with
I'm
himself
just
right
gushing over that so much. I still can't believe that actually happened. That's my favorite part about tonight.
Jen Kagan's in the Virginia 2nd district is actually looking like she's in pretty good shape. So 96.4% of election day precincts in. She's got a 22,000 vote lead. And we're down to about 57% of early votes still to be counted, assuming the Republicans do, decently in early votes.
Do we know how many early votes are there?
Yeah, so that comes out to about a little over 50,000 votes remaining. But again, Lori would have to do super well in early votes, and I don't know that it's going to be enough to take her over the top. It could be that the numbers are still there for Lori to hold that seat, but as I'm looking at it right now, I think Jen's in decent shape. Vega's the one I'm really worried about.
We've
right
got
now.
questions about Nevada. We're not quite there yet with Nevada. Got to wait for those numbers to come in.
Safe Democrat.
Okay.
That's Hampton Roads, Newport News, Portsmouth, safe Democrat.
Yeah. Let me see here.
Nick, there's a question. Somebody's asking when you're going to go on Joe Rogan. Is that on the calendar?
If you have some connections for us, that'd be great.
I'll text him up right now. Be like, Joe, big guy.
Yeah, we don't know Joe Rogan. But
JR. What do you mean? Don't tell people I don't know Joe Rogan, honey.
He'd love to go on it. He's been on Tim Pool, though.
I go around telling people all the time, oh, yeah, Joe and I, we hang out. We drink beer, talk about things now. That would be a lot of fun. Joe actually, I'll tell you one of the things that's neat about Joe Rogan, and I wouldn't necessarily assume this, but he actually does a great job interviewing people. And I think the reason why, if you watch a lot of interviews right now, it's painful to watch because it almost ends up being this series of like gotcha questions to where every time a reporter asks a question, if you want perfect examples of this, look at anybody that interviews Jordan Peterson, right? They're always like out to try to get him, it seems like. When Joe Rogan interviews someone, it doesn't matter where they are on the political spectrum, doesn't matter what the topic is. When he is asking a question, it's because he wants to know the answer, right? Not because he's trying to find a way to mess with you. It's because he actually wants to know the answer. And I think that's one of the things that makes him a really, really good at interviewing people. And it's not that he won't push back if he thinks someone gives a stupid answer. The head of Rolling Stone, Rolling Stone, fight the man, right? Speak truth to power, talking about, well, we need the government to monitor speech. Like, well, okay there, court reporter. And he called him out for it. But in the end, when he asks a question, I think it's because he generally wants to know the issue or know the answer to it.
All right, this guy named Snake, I don't even want to try and say his last name, but he says
Pliskin.
Thank you.
556
I thought
or
it might be a
762?
YouTube handle.
No,
Pliskin.
556 or 762. Okay, so that's a good question. I'll say this is a gun question. It depends. It really depends on what you're actually trying to do. 556 I think is a little bit more versatile, but obviously it doesn't tend to be it doesn't have the stopping power of a 762. I would say when you look at the SR types, the special rifles, the variants of the AR-15s, a 762 is something that I think that's a far more comprehensive round for anything that you would potentially want to do from hunting to CQB. So the 762 round is better. I'm talking about 762 by 5.1 though. I'm not talking about 7.62 by 3.9, which is AK-47 rounds. That's crap. It flips after 200 yards. So if you're talking about 7.62 by 5.1, that's the better round. It gets a little bit dicey in CQB situations because that goes through everything. But yeah, that'd be my answer.
Somebody brought up Escape from L.A. What's that?
It's a movie
You've never
from
seen Escape
like
from
the
LA?
80s.
I remember Escape from New York.
That's Snake. That's who was referenced. Like that's yeah. Escape from New York and Escape from L.A. with
Okay, I remember the New York one. I
Russell.
didn't remember L.A. Sorry,
I
guys.
did just show my age, yes.
Yeah, you did.
Neil777 says, where is the Making the Argument merch page? I want some swag. Neil, let me tell you, we will have that up at the beginning of next year.
Oh, really? We will?
We will.
Oh, that's good.
What are we
That's good.
selling?
That's good to hear, Hamilton, because I will tell you right now, I've been fighting for a merch page because I think we need to sell coffee mugs.
I created Nick's ugly mug,
You
which
did- she
we don't
did.
have one
I don't
up
have
here
that
to
one up
show
right
them,
now.
but it's got
But Hamilton
Nick on one
fought
side.
me on this, man. Hamilton's like, it's too expensive to do all this stuff. It's a distraction.
I never said we wouldn't ever do it. I merely said that we have to get the website up.
I've
that
got a joke
there's-
that
God.
only a couple friends of mine will appreciate, including Izzy Knight. I want to be selling my shares of Texas going blue on Predict It. So the backstory there was, I am not the election genius that Nick, you keep pumping me up as. The greatest fault that I have ever suffered as an election pundit,
I know
and
this one.
in terms of what I thought was going to happen, was there was a time where I genuinely thought, at the worst height of like the chaos of the summer of 2020, that Joe Biden would win Texas. And he ended up losing it by about 5 points. And so it made me look like a complete idiot because, how could I predict that Texas would go blue? Well, the problem is that I didn't predict the shift with Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley and in Harris County, where Houston is. And had that not taken place, there's a really good chance Texas would have gone blue. But I mean, Democrats just completely fumbled the ball when it came to a demographic that they just thought they had that locked up in the bag, and it turns out they didn't.
So let me go ahead and look at something real quick. All of the early votes, except for like 4 of them, or 5 of them, are in for the 7th district. There's 3 election day precincts out. Spanberger is ahead by 5,249 votes.
Oh,
Yeah, she
my
wins.
gosh.
So I don't think the outstanding election day precincts are going to be sufficient.
And it looks like they're precincts in Prince William, too.
Yeah, so it's 50.92% to 48.89. That is disappointing.
That's the margin that I thought when I was working up the model this morning. I knew that I remember telling a friend of mine named Ben that.
Oh, is that the margin you thought after the fact? That's
No,
cool.
no. I said the winner would get about 30,000 to 31,000 votes. And it turns out the winner did get about 31,000 votes. It just so happened it wasn't the winner that I wished for.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Like I said, there's only 3 outstanding precincts. All the early votes are finally in on that. But that also makes me wonder what is going on with the 2nd district. Let's look over there, refresh. 96.4% of election day, 44.3%. So, again, that's a little over 50,000 outstanding early votes. And Jen Kagan's is ahead by 22,000. I will say this. Okay, going back to the whole early vote totals, I mean, Vega didn't do terrible on the early vote totals. It just wasn't enough. Just wasn't enough. Okay, where are we looking at now? I'm like bouncing in between these things. Do we have any more questions? Where's the why are you scrolling up?
There's a good comment here.
Is there
Thanks
one?
to making the argument, my 8-year-old thinks he can justify arguing with me. Thanks, Nick. I may send you to straighten out.
Well, and then I asked if that
Good
means
job.
she's coming for a visit because that's actually my cousin Lindsay
Yeah.
in Kansas, and so there we go.
That's great. You know what? Hey, it's you want to build kids with resilience.
That's right.
I do think that we're getting to a point where it's probably going to come down to Nevada.
As far as who controls the Senate,
I think it's going to come down to Nevada. Republicans are probably going to win one of Georgia or Pennsylvania, and we don't know yet which one.
yeah.
Or one of Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. I don't necessarily think that they're going to win 2 out of the 3. So, shockingly, this is the first election that I can remember where it looks like I overshot Republican chances.
You never do that.
I've
Usually,
never done that in my life.
You're very much on the side of you err on the side of caution. I wonder, Christian.
I mean, I had
Have
that
you
gut
gone
feeling.
soft? I mean,
I
what's
had
going on
that.
here?
I had that gut feeling, like I said earlier in this live stream, that pollsters had oversampled Republicans.
You did. Okay, I will confirm. Christian did in fact say that several days ago. It wasn't. He's not just saying it now. So I got your back, buddy. I got your back. All right, let me see. Macomb County is going to Kent County. Only 17% of the vote. We're talking about Michigan. So we don't really got enough to play with there.
I mean, Pennsylvania's still only at 32%.
It's taken forever to
Yeah.
count votes there.
Yeah, Pennsylvania wants us to get no sleep tonight. Okay, so it looks like it's opening up a little bit more in Ohio, though. Well, yeah, it kind of is. 60% of the vote in. Vance is at 53.1%. Ryan at 46.9%. I'm trying to find a good map to look at so we can actually see. You know, that's what you need to do, Christian. Create the VPAP website, but for the entire country. Can you get on that?
Can you do that?
No.
please?
Can you get on that
Come
real
on
quick?
Yeah, I would like an initial angel investment of $1 billion.
You know what? We'll just have our own IT guy did it.
By the way, I still think that Vance is going to pull it out in Ohio.
Yeah, I think Vance pulls it out.
When you look at the remaining vote that is outstanding that hasn't been counted, you're looking at still the Cincinnati metro area, which I've said earlier is a Republican-leaning metro area. And you're looking at the outer suburbs of you can't even really say they're suburbs at this point. I'm talking like Stark County and stuff like that. That's like way to the south, like south of like Toledo even. Sorry, south of Akron. Not Toledo. Toledo's all the way near the border with Michigan. But when you look at the votes that are outstanding there, it's almost enough to offset the votes that are outstanding in Cleveland and Columbus. There's not a whole lot left in Cincinnati, but there's a lot that's still outstanding in Cleveland and Columbus. But they're basically going to cancel each other out. And so if the remaining vote that's outstanding is roughly 50-50, it's not going to actually fall 50-50, but it's close enough to 50-50, that's going to mean that Vance is probably going to end up winning. And my guess is that he's going to end up winning by like 5 points. Something very similar to what he's currently leading by.
Yeah, we're finally getting more for Pennsylvania as well, and Fetterman's dropping now. Is only 35% reporting, but now he's at 51.5. Again, the most important there is gotta look at the. Let me see if I can get this up here right here. And see.
New York is also taking forever to count.
Yeah.
Only 25% of the vote in.
Hey,
Kathy
Blue-
Hochul has
hey,
a 500,000 vote lead right now.
Blue
though.
states, would you do us a favor and get your crap together when it comes to letting us know when precincts have voted?
Look, we have to count them only one at a time with one person counting all of them, or else you're against democracy. By the way, Marco Rubio just took the lead in Palm Beach County.
Oh wow!
So both statewide offices have carried the county at this point.
Let me see here.
Let's see. All right. Well, what else do we got, guys? You're getting boring.
You're boring. I'm just kidding, baby. I love you.
All right.
All right. Well, so let me see here.
Fun fact: my second job,
Yeah.
I worked at a radio station and produced commercials and things like that. And so there's this crazy instinct thing where when we have a little bit of dead air, I'm freaking out in my head. That's just a little insight into my brain and why I keep going, okay, guys, keep talking. Tell these people more things they might want to hear. go ahead and comment if you've got any questions, election related or other.
Somebody asked earlier whether or not your bees were doing all right.
Well, I have one very strong hive doing fantastic. I could barely even lift the box. It's so full of honey for the winter because I didn't take any honey from them this year because it's my first year. And honey is meant for them to be able to eat through the winter for survival. And so I didn't take any. They had packed that box out. It was one deep. Anybody who keeps bees knows what that means. But they're doing fantastic. My other hive, and so the really strong hive came from a nuke that I got here locally. It was wonderful. It was just beautiful.
What is a nuke?
A nuke, you've got a box that is like a sort of little mini portable hive, and they put 5 frames in there that already have brood, which are the babies, and there's already a queen laying eggs, and they're already built out and everything.
Oh, wow.
And so
that's not what Putin says a nuke is.
So then you put that into your hive, and they just keep working, and they're already actively going for it. Well, the other hive that I have, I got from a package of bees, and they're starting from scratch, and so you have to feed them sugar water to cause them to make wax in order to build out their frames, and they have to build out the frames before they can ever lay any eggs or brood or anything like that, or store honey. So they're just frantically working. And so they were going to be quite a ways behind the others already. But they've just really, it's just, they're a much weaker hive, and it really, really shows. So from here on out, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about getting bees, get a nuke, get an overwintered nuke. It is so much better. The price difference is, for a package, you're getting like $150 or $160 for a package of bees with a queen, versus a nuke with 5 frames and a queen already laying for about $250. I would say the $250 is absolutely worth it. So there's my update on the bees.
It does look like that Kiggins is potentially on track to win in the second.
Yes,
yeah, she's ranked as likely are right now.
That's not a guarantee.
Not a guarantee.
But here's why I'm more bullish on Kiggins than I am Luria. And the reason why is because when you look at the outstanding early votes, basically all election days in, early votes is all that's left. And when you look at how many early votes are still outstanding, it's around 56,000. When you look at the vote lead that Kiggins has, that's around 22,000. So what that means is mathematically, Luria needs almost 70% of the early vote that's still outstanding to go to her to win.
I don't think she's getting that.
You get those numbers in Fairfax or Prince William potentially, but you don't get 70% of the early vote in Virginia Beach.
No.
I mean, she's going to win the early vote almost certainly, especially in places that are very, very close like Virginia Beach, but she's not going to win 70% of the early vote that's outstanding. I find that very, very unlikely. I'm not willing to call it yet, but I think that Kiggins absolutely is the favorite right now to actually flip the second.
Okay.
Well, and again, as the numbers come in too for North Carolina, North Carolina's looking better. Ohio's looking better. Georgia's still just super close for the Senate. Yeah, and then Pennsylvania, we're still.
Nick, I've got a question from Matt who asks, could you opine on the legislative agenda that should take place if Republicans flip the House and Senate?
Right, and somebody else had asked you to opine on some of the races coming up in Virginia.
Okay, so on the federal level, so you're saying if they take back the U.S. House and Senate.
For those of you who don't know, here in Virginia, we have an election every single year. Yeah. So
there's no break.
With that knowledge, go ahead, Nick.
There's no break. Anyways, okay, but the first question was what should the Republican House agenda be, House and Senate be within the legislature? First thing you have to understand, obviously, is that Biden can veto it. All right, so the real question is what are the things that you want to push? There's 2 sorts of issues that you want to push. Obviously, there's the agenda items which line up with your ideology, and then there's agenda items that line up with your ideology that have a better chance of passing with the Democrat in the White House, right? So that doesn't mean you only do one and you don't do the other. You should do both, but you should do both with different expectations with respect to how they're actually going to go forward. So the reason why you push certain issues, even if you don't think the president would sign it, is because you want the voters to know that this is what you want to do. And this is what would happen if you guys were in charge. And then there's other things that you're trying to work in order to get, something done, or to potentially convince the chief executive to be able to sign off on a bill. Right off the bat, we have to focus on energy policy, because the only way that you're going to actually start to really bring down gas prices is that you have to have more competition in the market. You have to have more supply. And so energy is a huge issue. Another big problem right now that is affecting the economy is inflationary monetary policy. Now, this has been a problem through multiple administrations, all right? This is not something where Republicans can purely look at Democrats and say this is all your fault. However, right now, Jerome Powell has actually done, he hasn't always done a great job. He's actually done a pretty good job right now. You have to raise interest rates to a certain degree where you can kind of get the inflation out of the economy. But what you can do at the same time is that you can actually reduce the burdens of doing business. And what that usually means is that you have to cut non-essential government spending, you have to reduce taxes, and you have to reduce regulations. I will say right now there will be a lot of pushback on reducing taxes right now. The left will immediately come out and say that, oh, you just want to cut these government programs because you hate poor people, because that's their line, that and you're racist. But one of the things that you should be able to do that should be easy across the board is the regulatory policy. A lot of what is holding up the energy sector is bad regulatory policy. A lot of what holds up issues with supply chain is regulatory policy. I'll give you a perfect example of this. When we talk about a lot of the food shortages, some of those food shortages take place as a result of supply and demand issues or supply chain issues, but a lot of the supply chain problems are with the government regulators. So I'll give you for instance. If I want to go over to my neighbor right now and buy a steak dinner, right, there's a whole bunch of rules that go into that. It's not like they can just have a cow, raise a cow, slaughter the cow, and then sell me some cuts, right? That's going to go through a federally approved processing plan in order to do a lot of that. So removing some of these regulations, or just recognizing that, okay, there's such a thing as public safety. We can all understand that. But there's also such a thing as creating such onerous regulations that you drastically increase the cost and the price of doing business. And the end result is that people are paying much more than they otherwise would have to. Or what we've seen in recent situations, you can't even get it, right? We all know what it's like now to show up to the grocery store and not be able to see the product that we want. And we're not talking about something exotic, right? We're talking about, chicken legs. So the regulatory policy is something I would focus a lot on with the new House, because I think it would actually alleviate a lot of the problems we see in the supply chain and what people are really feeling on a day-to-day basis when they go to the gas pump, when they go to the grocery store. And then the left doesn't get to come in and say, oh, well, you're just cutting all these programs. So that's one where I think you could actually get something done effectively. I think when we look at trade policy, we want to push towards something that actually facilitates greater trade. Now, that sounds really easy. The problem right now is that there's kind of this attitude of regulating and restricting and coming up with all sorts of rules before you can buy products or sell products. So that trade problem, that regulatory problem, is not only with domestic trade, it's also with international trade. And so all of these are things that I would focus on. Also, the government should not be interfering in education to the degree that it even does right now. I don't understand why we're spending $80 billion a year on the Department of Education. But whenever you say that, people will automatically think, oh, you must be anti-education. No, what I'm against is the federal government ripping billions of dollars out of communities, which could be used to actually help those schools, running it through a massive federal bureaucracy and then giving a portion of it back with a bunch of strings attached. So that's another thing I would look at. And then I think on top of all of that, if we really want some good long-term policy for the federal government, we need to do things like what Rand Paul has tried to do, what Thomas Massie has tried to do, things like the REINS Act. So many of the problems that we face, right, where there's this ripple effect throughout our economy that makes it harder to buy products and services, harder to produce goods and services, is this process whereby the legislature essentially delegates its responsibilities over to the federal government, and then they'll say, okay, we want clean air, regulatory agency, Go promulgate regulations. And the next thing you know, you've got 77,000 pages of tax code and regulatory policy and everything else. The REINS Act would essentially put the brakes on some of that and say, hey, look, before the executive branch takes over a bunch of responsibilities that are supposed to belong to the legislature, someone's going to have to vote on this. We got to see it, review it, and vote on it. So the executive branch can still provide its recommendations, but you don't get to implement this policy until the legislature has actually done its job. And as wonky as all of that sounds, it is absolutely critical to fix some of the structural problems that we see within the federal government. Not to mention the fact, as I said before, I think you could see some immediate effects on making it easier for people to be more productive in the economy. We have a huge problem right now with the federal government where they punish you for production and they subsidize you for non-production. That is a recipe for economic disaster. And when you combine that with things like inflationary monetary policy, it's a huge problem. So that's what I do.
Nice.
Bam!
Christian, I had a good question, I believe, from Richard asking what you think the final numbers will be for tonight, if you have any idea.
Like, do you want to alter your predictions?
Well, my predictions are going to be wrong, at least to some degree. They're certainly not going to be 100% accurate. What?
Thanks again, Hamilton. I'll tell you what, you're batting 1,000 tonight, buddy.
Wait, what?
It didn't cut away from Nick. So
I love the fact that there's all these people talking about OnlyFans pages by AOC. Oh my gosh.
So here's, to answer the question, here's what I think is going to happen. I think Republicans are, if they flip the Senate, notice how I'm now saying if.
Sure.
If they flip the Senate, it's probably only going to be with 51 or 52 seats, not 53 or 54. They're going to flip the House, but it's probably not going to be like 35 seats plus. And I said if it's over 30 seats, it's going to be a landslide or a tsunami. It's probably now looking more like the 220 to 230 range, not the 230 plus range. So that's where I'm at. The media is going to spin this and say this was a disaster for Republicans. But if they end up flipping both chambers of Congress, they end up flipping both chambers of Congress.
So again, Florida took the entire storm.
Oh, here's the thing. Florida met the expectations. It's everything else that's not meeting the expectations. But it's not like it's a disaster for Republicans. That's the thing. You can have a scenario where, here's an example, 2020. Yeah. 2020, Democrat victories, but they definitely underperformed the polling. Now, I'm not saying we're underperforming the polling by 16 points like they did in Wisconsin, but it's pretty clear that Republicans are underperforming the polling by about 1 or 2 points in the House and by varying degrees in the Senate, depending on the state. There's some states where they're not underperforming polling. There's some where they're drastically underperforming polling. So it really just, you know what it tells me? It tells me that we spent, on this podcast, we spent quite a long time, not just us, many other people in conservative media spent quite a long time saying that, you know, Democrats were speaking to the electorate improperly, right? They were focused on abortion, climate change, and January 6th. And the American people were caring about immigration, inflation, and crime. And what this tells me is that, well, we were both wrong. Half of America did not care about inflation, immigration, and crime. They did care about abortion, climate change, and January 6th. And half of America did not care about abortion, climate change, and January 6th. They cared about inflation, immigration, and crime. And what I think that the big takeaway from tonight will be is that the United States is even more divided into separate echo chambers and bubbles in terms of media consumption, worldview, politics, philosophy, outlook on life, and government in general than most people thought that we were. And many people thought we were very, very divided and that people were very much in different echo chambers, because I think that it's very clear now. We've seen examples of this on the left where they were completely out of touch with half of the country. And now I think that there's evidence to suggest that the right also was speaking to a segment of America and not the other segment. And in large part because people are now, and you see this with Twitter too, right? Like the left is now deserting Twitter. Before, 6 months ago, it was the right that was deserting Twitter. Right? They were going to Parler and Truth Social and all that stuff. And now you're going to see the left do the same thing now that Elon's taking over Twitter and it looks like the right is running Twitter, even though they're not. Like, they're going to be going to their own echo chambers. And I think this is just more evidence of the ideological sorting
Right.
and echo chamber effect that we've seen accelerate exponentially over the last couple decades.
Well, here's my question: Do we see something like Florida where people genuinely? Again, it used to be there was this argument, and that the reason why people moved didn't have as much to do with politics as people often suggested. I mean, yeah, taxes might have something to do with it, but the reason why people moved to Florida was not because they wanted a particular type of government. It's because they wanted a particular type of climate, right? So what I wonder is, are we getting closer and closer to a point, as it does become more polarized, where you're once again going to see people where it's not good enough to move to the country. You're moving to find a state that you can be reasonably sure is going to be governed the way you want it to be governed. And so it's not going to be something where people leave California for Texas, like businesses leave California for Texas simply because they want a better, tax rate. But then as soon as they get there, they vote like they're right back in California, right? Do we think we're going to see more, self-sorting like this along ideological lines?
Probably. We do have some polls that have recently closed and some numbers that are starting to come in now for like Florida. I noticed that, but I didn't want to interrupt you guys. But then Sean Casey noticed it too. So I thought, okay, I better go ahead and interrupt. So yeah, we've got some information coming in from Arizona, and they only have about 30-something percent.
38% in for Arizona. And it's 55-44 for Hobbs. Wisconsin.
Well, look at the Senate.
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah,
Lake's down by 11 points right now in Arizona, but that's with 38% in.
But that tends to tell you where some of this stuff is coming from.
Yeah,
because her numbers wouldn't be that low if these were red areas, which is really interesting because a lot of times it seems like really red areas report right away and blue areas take forever to report. But in this case, it's kind of opposite. It seems like you've got some really, really blue places reporting first. Like that's what happened in Pennsylvania, and now it's starting to tighten up. And so I'm kind of wondering what the dynamic is there and why those blue areas are reporting first. Could it be, here's my theory.
Okay.
Could it be because so many Democrats vote early now that it's a lot easier to count those blue areas now because they don't?
This is one of those things that I get in before, right? Where it actually matters on the state level. It matters how you count the votes. Not every state counts the votes the same way. The biggest problem that we have in Virginia 7 in 2020, and the reason why it looked like such a massive flip, was because they took all of the early votes, which was literally half the votes that were cast in the entire election, and they threw them all in the absentee category that they counted last, which did not make any sense. It was the reason why they did it that way is because that's how they counted absentees. And when we had all this massive early voting and mail-in balloting, because during COVID, they just stuck with that plan. And we actually changed some stuff with that to try to make that a little bit better. And I think that you saw that with the results here in Virginia, that we actually got results back within a pretty reasonable time frame. You're not seeing that in some of these other areas. And so again, I'm looking at this. Where do I see a lot of problems with votes coming in super slow? Pennsylvania, Ohio wasn't as bad, but there was some issues there. New Hampshire has been problematic. Michigan seems to be really slow. So again, that can entirely be due toward whether or not there's a sense of urgency within the state legislature to count votes quickly, effectively, and to do it in such a way to where it makes sense to voters.
We might be looking at a scenario where Democrats actually hold the Senate at this point.
What? Christian, stop it.
Don't
even speak it into the air.
I made this joke with Nick before we started, and I said, wouldn't it be terrible if this ended up being like the Young Turks live stream from 2016?
Oh, it's definitely not that. You haven't dropped any F-bombs
Nobody's
at all.
been shouting and saying, this is your fault. We're going to burn the system down. You're a bunch of losers.
I will never forget that little compilation of everybody's meltdown in 2016. Sometimes I'll watch that just when I need
therapy,
just to feel the warm and fuzzies. I watch it.
I mean, no, I'm serious that there's a good chance that that Democrats will hold 50 seats in the Senate. I don't necessarily know if they will win. By the way, we better hope and pray that they don't get 51 seats, because if they get 51 seats, they will be axing the filibuster. And that will be very bad for stuff that will happen down the road. Doesn't even matter if they don't have a trifecta. Like, one day they will, and when the filibuster gets axed, you're going to see a whipsawing of very, very radical legislation being passed back and forth. Like there's a reason, and there's many Republicans that I know that back when we were in charge that were like, oh, we should get rid of the filibuster. And
nope,
that is not a wise policy proposal at all. As Calvin Coolidge said it best when he said, it is more important to kill bad bills than it is to pass good bills.
That is absolutely true. We have a saying in the General Assembly, because every once in a while, and a lot of times it's a newer legislator that has a bill, and I mean, it's just their baby, right? And we not only tell them, don't fall in love with your bill, but one of our other favorite sayings when somebody's like, I can't believe this isn't going to pass, you look at them like, you know what? The Commonwealth of Virginia has lasted over 400 years without your piece of legislation. I'm willing to bet we make it another year.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to remember. Though. It's a good thing to remember, because as much as we do want to get good legislation passed, to Christian's point,
gridlock is in the system for a reason.
George Will had probably one of the best quotes on this that I heard, where he said, political gridlock is not an American problem, it's an American achievement. And this kind of goes back to my, I make this point a lot. I think I did a reel on this not too long ago. It is so tempting when your side is in power to think that, my gosh, the wheels of government just turn too slowly. No, the wheels of government turn slowly for a reason, and the reason is the government uses force, the threat of violence, and sometimes violence itself to achieve what it wants, right? That's its mechanism for achieving things. And that is not the primary source that you want trying to address problems and challenges in life. What you really want is a system that maximizes the ability for individuals to work in voluntary cooperation with one another and competition at times. Not a system where, hey, we elect some people and then they just decide what's going to happen, and the rest of us get to deal with it. And so, yeah, to Christian's point, to Coolidge's point, keeping structures in place in order to ensure that people can't just arbitrarily throw around their power to achieve what they want that's what a free country is. I get so tired of the Democrats lately talking about like, this is between democracy or authoritarianism. Hey, I got news for you, dude. If 51% are voting to do some pretty bad things, that's going to seem pretty authoritarian to the 49% that you're subjugating to it. Right? Real freedom is about actually restricting government power, not just about allowing citizens to select their representatives for every 2, 4 to 6 years. And one of the things that drives me nuts about understanding what we're not just here. Yes, we want to preserve democratic processes for our constitutional republic, but we also want to do so with a proud and happy recognition that the constitutional limitations put on government power are there for our freedom every bit, if not more, than just getting to elect, people to office. Peace out.
I'm gonna jump in here right quick before we wrap up. I'm sure everybody has a few more things to say, but I just want to give some closing announcements to everyone real quick. If you are in the Charlottesville area, Team Freitas, Nick will be speaking at UVA tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Go to Nick's Facebook page, look at the event information there.
We're really hoping that it's hostile.
Oh my gosh.
We are hoping to have a
lively discussion.
It would be so spicy though if it was hostile.
Anyway, come see us at UVA tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Event details on Nick's Facebook page at the event. If you've been here with us since 7 o'clock Eastern tonight, thank you very much. 7:30, or if you're just hopping right in for a few minutes, we really want to thank you. We had a question about volley a little bit earlier, about whether that was some place that you could go to get involved with legislation. What I will say is if you join our volley, you will be more prepared to make the argument for legislation that you support, or just gather more information on legislation so you are equipped to make a better argument. Thank you all again. I'm going to let Nick take it over before we wrap up here. Go to the link in the description for volley. You can join us there. We'd love to get to see you there. And thank you all for joining us. I'm going to hand it back to Nick.
I've got a question for you to kind of like wrap us out. And it's a shame that we're not able to stay until the polls close.
Yeah,
entirely
apparently
on the West
Hamilton's
Coast.
tired. He just
I feel like this-
spontaneed this. He's like, okay, we're wrapping it up. It's my bedtime.
Well, we've been on for 3 hours. It just doesn't feel like it's been 3 hours.
It doesn't.
This was
really.
a lot of fun.
But I've got a question that
The
I
first
think
30 minutes felt like 3 hours for Hamilton as he was trying to
Poor Hamilton.
as and I have a feeling that a lot of our audience members would actually be curious what you think about this, or might be thinking this question themselves. Like, what do and honestly, we probably should do an entire podcast on it, but I want to tease this out.
we are the
What
whole. Yeah, go ahead.
is your reaction to what we're seeing tonight, which looks like that Republicans will flip the House? We don't know if they're going to flip the Senate. It's
Yeah.
a coin toss at this point, which is not what we were thinking going into this.
No.
So what does that tell you in terms of why this happened, what it means for the entire country? Because the country is not nearly as pro GOP right now as we thought it was, despite everything that's going on. And what does that mean going forward in terms of how do we win? But also, even outside of the campaign politics, I really am curious, as I said earlier with the whole echo chamber and bubble effect, like, what's your response to this? I'm just curious what you're
Well,
thinking.
I mean, I don't. It would have been nice if we were rolling in here and all of a sudden we were picking up 3 seats in Virginia and, my gosh, Oz was already ahead. In
Washington.
Pennsylvania. It would be great. I mean, is it going right now? Like you said, looks like we're going to take back the House. Looks like we're going to pick up a seat in Virginia. As far as the red tsunami, it looks like that was pretty much
A red
all
ripple.
all in Florida.
As
Right,
usual,
like, yeah.
Florida takes all the weather.
Yeah. But as far as some of these others, I'm just not sure yet. We're at 40% in Arizona, and Lake is, far down, but that depends on what's being counted right now. Up in Michigan, again, we're at only 23% because, my gosh, it's taking them forever. So we'll see. Here's what I'll bring it back to. And this was one of the questions we had. Are we watching some sort of significant dynamic shift within the, whole of the country? Or are we watching people react to individual events which are taking place as a result of this specific election cycle? And I think what's the argument that I've always made on this is that when you are running exclusive, or when you are running primarily off of the other side doing a bad job, you're not asking people to vote for something, you're asking them to vote against something. Now, the trouble is that it's really, really easy to point to somebody that's doing as bad as Joe Biden is doing right now and say, oh my gosh, you need something else. But I think one of the most revolutionary shift that I saw in politics in my lifetime was 1994. And the difference there is that when Republicans were running, they actually ran on the contract with America. And there was a couple of very, very distinct components of that. It was, if you elect us, we will do this in the first 100 days. Now, here's what's so important about that, and here's what distinguishes that from all the other crap that you hear politicians say all the time. They gave you specific markers that actually appealed to the issues that you cared about, and they gave you a time frame in which they would do it, and they told you, and if we don't do it in 100 days, kick us out of office. Now, I've seen a lot of Republicans this election cycle that have talked about the problems of inflation, the problems of supply chain, the problems of crime, but there has not been the same specificity with respect to within the first 100 days, if you put us in charge, we will pass all of these bills through the House and Senate. That has not existed. In fact, nobody has done that since Gingrich did it in 94. And I have no idea why, except for the fact that we have a lot of people that are scared about trying to get a coalition together around very specific issues that elect us and will do this. And here's all I can say. I understand that when you set up a broad policy platform like that you promise to deliver to the American people within a short period of time, 100 days is a quick turnaround. I understand that can be difficult for different candidates in different races, but what we saw in 94 was that it works. Be smart about it, do it right, identify the issues. So if we were coming out and we were being far more specific about this is our response to inflation, this is our response to crime, this is our response to rising gas prices, this is our response to immigration policy, elect us and we will pass all of these in the first 100 days and we will dare Joe Biden to veto it. We didn't do that. And I think it's something that we have to start taking a lot more seriously when we talk about running is what are we going to do? What are we promising people that we are going to deliver on that is tangible, and what is the time frame that we've given to them? So I think that's a big lesson for all of this. The other part that I will I will emphasize, as long as I got a voice to do it, we have to be able to talk about what we believe in a way that is meaningful to the people that we're talking to. I've hammered on this a lot. A lot of times Republicans are really good at bringing out charts and graphs, or lately Republicans have been far more likely to make, I would say, just kind of raw emotional appeals that aren't as effective as the ones that really hit people where they're at. And here's what I mean by that. When you talk about this is what we'll do for crime, or this is what we'll do for inflation, or this is what we'll do for taxes, or whatever it is, or this is what we'll do for regulatory policy, you need to be able to provide examples and stories that illustrate the point that you're talking about in a way that will resonate and stick with people so they remember it. And so when you talk about regulatory policy, don't just talk about it on the 10,000-foot level all the time. Find that story that will illustrate the principle in a way that is meaningful to people and that will stick with them. Not because you're using some sort of gimmick, but because at the end of the day, that's why you're doing it. I don't fight for free markets because I just happen to like Ludwig von Mises more than I do Karl Marx. The reason why I believe in free markets is because at the end of the day, when that person is thinking about what it means to be free, they're not thinking about, oh, I get to show up and vote for somebody. What they're thinking about is, I have an idea for what my life is going to look like economically, socially, and that manifests itself in a career that they want to go into, in a business that they want to build, on a product that they want to develop. And the more that we can talk about how our policies facilitate them being able to do that, not because the government is micromanaging and holding their hand throughout every step of the process, but because we're creating the sort of environment where we allow things like that to be able to flourish organically within a free society, with people working together, cooperating with one another, competing with one another, to be, at the end of the day, better serve other people so that they can also take care of themselves and their families. That resonates. And it doesn't resonate because a politician said it. It resonates because I don't care what you think your political philosophy is. Each one of us wants that. And so many people, especially people that have come to this country from other places, grew up knowing it was never going to happen for them. And when they got over here, they knew they didn't have enough time, even with the opportunity here. They knew they didn't have enough time to fully realize it for themselves, but damn it, they were going to make sure it happened for their kids. And so that's what we need to get back to if we're actually serious. Because ultimately, the reason I do what I do is not because I want the Republicans to run everything. I would love it if anybody running for office, regardless of what party they affiliate with, understands that that is the magic and beauty of what makes this place special. Not merely getting to elect people. So that's my statement on it.
That was a great way to make the argument on a live stream.
Heck yeah.
Talking about election night.
All right. Well, listen, I think a lot of people are tired. I know it's a long night. It's going to be a longer night. Here's the good news. We haven't been able to obviously get to everything we wanted to tonight. Thanks a lot, Pennsylvania.
There's
By the way,
one question.
Sean's question, yes, if Georgia does not go to 50% for either party, for anybody, then it does go to a runoff.
There will be a runoff. Okay, so look tonight, well, a couple things we're just going to point out real quick as we close out. It does look like, in District 7, it does look like it's going to be Abigail Spanberger. In District 2, it's still going to be very close, but I think Jen Kagans probably has a big enough lead, or Kagans has a big enough lead to be able to win that race. When it comes to Senate races, a lot of the ones that we wanted to be able to call tonight already, probably not going to happen, specifically Pennsylvania and Georgia. I do think that right now it's 74% of the vote, and J.D. Vance has 54%, and Ryan has 46%. I think that's looking fairly strong that we're gonna get Ohio. When it comes to Arizona, I honestly don't know right now. I thought Kari Lake would be doing a little bit better at this point, but we'll see. Right now Pennsylvania's, again, what's the total number on here? Total number of people votes in. I'm trying to look at the total number, the percentage in.
I'm not sure.
All right, it looks like only 57% in Pennsylvania. So I think we're pretty safe with Ohio. We're safe with North Carolina. Those are two of the predictions that we keep: Ohio and North Carolina. PA we don't know about. Georgia is close, but it seems to be trending in the right direction there. Wisconsin is also another one that we're gonna have to watch. That one looks like it could be potentially problematic. So I think at the end of the day, we can probably go to sleep tonight knowing that we're going to take back the House, but probably by a smaller margin than we'd like. The Senate is still up for grabs at this point, but it's probably going to be too hard to tell. So here's what I'm going to tell you. First of all, for everyone, we had 5,219 views tonight. We had an average concurrent viewer rate of in the 200s. So for everyone that stuck with us here on election night, really appreciate it. We had a blast. We hope you had a good time too. It was wonderful to be able to see your questions. We're going to do a post-mortem of this election. That's every election cycle. We do a couple of things. This is our first time doing a live stream, but we usually do predictions leading into the election to kind of get people thinking about, where we're going to go, what's going to happen. And then we go back and we look at the results and we try to analyze why things were different than what we might have predicted or why they happened the way we predicted. So our next episode, which will be coming out on Thursday. Will be that post-mortem of the election cycle. As Hamilton said, if you're anywhere near Charlottesville, Virginia, you want to go over to the beautiful campus at University of Virginia, the campus that Thomas Jefferson really started. Please stop by and see us. It's going to be a Turning Point USA. The actual topic of the conversation is the rise of left-wing authoritarianism, which I'm sure will garner some interest at UVA.
I want to end it with it like literally just like 30 seconds ago. It's been called for Kagan's in Virginia Beach.
Yay.
So,
At least we picked up one.
We picked up one.
Pickup.
All righty.
Christian, what's your Twitter handle?
At Christian Heiens, but it's a really, really weird way to spell Heiens. It's Heiens, three vowels in a row. So at Christian Heiens.
Folks can get future updates from you on Twitter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tweet about election stuff. I tweet about economics a lot.
Yeah, but you'll probably be tweeting all night.
At some point, I'll go to bed. But I will, in the coming days, tweet a little bit more about the election. I'll find some neat facts. This county broke a record that you haven't seen in X years, stuff like that.
Well, don't do too much of it. You got to save some of it for the podcast, man.
What I'm really interested in is more of the philosophical side. I know that some people are really into the electoral side, and I am too, but I really want to know, what does this mean for the country? Because I have a view of what it means for the country, but I'm really curious what you think and what Tina thinks and Hamilton and honestly our audience as well.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Thank you for sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed the commentary night, the little playful banter that we had, the information that you received on bees that you didn't know you would get tonight, but I hope you're pleasantly surprised that you did. Anyways, we will see you next episode. Stop by UVA if you're in the neighborhood tomorrow night. And don't forget to tune in Thursday where we will make sense of everything that we just saw that doesn't currently make sense. I'm Nick Freitas with Making the Argument. Thank you for joining us.